Good evening. I am glad to welcome all my fellow board members and call the March 13th, 2018 school board meeting to order. On behalf of my colleagues, I'd like to thank all of you who are in attendance tonight in person or watching the meeting from another location for investing your time and energy to join us tonight. We do appreciate and applaud your commitment to partnering with us in support of our schools, our students, our staff, and our community. And while the board and Brevard Public School staff members are fully committed to doing our best to ensure excellence in Brevard Public Schools, we truly know that our success depends heavily on an engaged and committed community to work alongside us and to help us continually improve. Thank you for being active participants in this process. Pam, roll call, please.
Mrs. Belford?
Present.
Mr. Craig?
Present.
Mrs. Deskovich?
Present.
Mr. Susan?
Here.
And Mr. Ziegler?
Here. This evening, please join me in a moment of silence as we mourn the loss of a member of our BPS family, Derek Fortmeyer, a 10th grade student from Satellite High School. Thank you. This evening, Matt Reed, Assistant Superintendent of Government and Community Relations, will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We are now at the adoption of the agenda. Dr. Blackburn.
No.
I'm sorry, I missed that because I was paying attention to another page. In accordance with our tradition, I'd like to offer my fellow board members and the superintendent a opportunity to give any recognitions for community, staff, students, and such. And we'll start with, I think we started the other way, so Mr. Susan, can we start with you, please?
Sure. So I had the honor of, we sent for the first time, we created 4 construction and trades programs that are part of the Future Builders of America. We created sub-chapters at Astronaut High School, at Space Coast, at Palm Bay, and at Melbourne. And we actually had the kids choose who would go and everything else. And if you can believe it, we sent 9 kids last Thursday to go compete in the statewide Future Builders of America competition on the West Coast. These kids were amazing. They went over there, and for the first time in, I think it's 16 years, we formed these chapters, and we went. And come to find out, we have more chapters than any other county, and we have more kids involved than any other county already. So those kids came back on Sunday and they had a great time. It was the Home Builders and Contractors Association along with the Associated Builders and Contractors Association that actually paid for it. So it was an amazing opportunity for our kids. I also had the honor of today being with Mr. Arnott at over there at his at Clear Lake Middle, talking about how he is going to formulate a plan for the advanced manufacturing lab that we have coming into Cocoa. And he had representatives from Eastern Florida State, from the Economic Development Council, from CareerSource, from all of those different, basically the head of the Manufacturers Association for the state of Florida was there talking about how we are going to be one of the diamonds in the entire state of Florida for advanced manufacturing and for trades. That is an amazing opportunity for us to take the lead on, and I think that our public needs to know how much we've been doing with the trades over the last couple of years. That's also the place where they just opened up all of the trades for the Associated Builders and Contractors. There's over 150 kids every night at the Clear Lake facility going through electrical, plumbing, everything else, and that's pretty amazing too. I also wanted to say thank you to Miss Middleton and Johnson Middle School, who had a community event where we had yesterday at 8 o'clock in the morning. We had a bunch of the community leaders from around the county that were inside there, along with, around her area, along with the resource officers and everybody else, and she ran an amazing meeting where we collaborated on different ways to improve the school culture and help the kids in the community. I think we as teachers and school board members know how much our schools have become a support mechanism for families as they get torn down and everything else, and that's a great meeting to have. Next week, we start the first time, we're going to start having kids from the Florida Department of Education's it's called the STAR program, and if you have any disability, all the way from Asperger's to gifted or anything, you're able to qualify for this, which allows you to get full employment until you're 22 years old, and it pays for you, and it's workers' comp covered too. So you can go and work in the zoo, you can work in any of the manufacturing companies, you can do all those things. We put in 120 kids last year as a part of a pilot program. That's more than double any other county has ever done. And this year, we're going to put 1,000 kids through. So there will hopefully be 1,000 kids identified this summer that will be working in employment, and that's more than anybody else. The Department of Education came down last week and met with the EDC to put together plans, special projects where they could cover the cost of CPT and other things for later on. And the last piece is the innovation games that I'm so excited about. That's next week, and you guys don't have to hear about it anymore, but we actually have Northrop Grumman that has 4 breakout sessions, along with drone racing, drone innovation. You have a FLIR camera out there where they're going to be able to do thermal imaging of the students. You have a jet dragster that's coming out there from FIT to talk about the dynamics of the jet engines, and just a lot of really good things. And that's going to be March 23rd from 1 o'clock to 4 o'clock. I hope you guys can make it. And that's it, John.
Fantastic, thank you. Ms. Deskovich.
I will start off with the shout out to the Southern Region Science Fair. They asked me today when I was attending the judges luncheon to make sure that you all know that they're open. The open house is tomorrow from 3 to 6 p.m. at the Melbourne Auditorium, and you can go check out all the science projects that are competing in the southern area. And the art show is also going on. Miss Klein and I toured today, and it seems like our kids this last year have stepped up their game. I was very impressed. I want to say thank you to Satellite Beach Police Chief, Chief Pearson, and Commander Hodge. They put on a school security night at the Satellite Beach Civic Center, and it was a very informative evening, and they talked about their training as the City of Satellite Beach Police Department and their response and what they do. They have SROs in some of the Satellite Beach schools, so I loved his initiative and open to the public and took questions, the tough questions. It was a good evening. Again, Satellite High, we kicked off their ribbon cutting for their track, which they have been working on for a couple years. They have pulled together, it's 8 lanes, rubberized. It is top of the line track, and the greatest part of the program is it's been funded by the communities. The City of Satellite Beach put in funds, the City of Indian Harbor Beach put in funds, obviously the school district. Coach Butler spearheaded the whole thing, the track coach. He brought in a multitude of business partners and families that all donated. So that was a big celebration there in Satellite Beach. On a different note, I was invited to attend a luncheon last week. It was called a mindfulness luncheon by a group. They're online. They're called Support Mindful Schools. And I really like what they're doing. We have a couple schools within our district that have kind of embraced this mindfulness. It's a way to teach, right now, especially our younger children, ways to kind of center and focus, breathing exercises, things to help them focus. And they gave out 2 awards at that luncheon, one to the principal of Century Elementary, because they kind of embraced this program and they're seeing a great positive impact on their students. And they gave the second award to Janice Kershaw of Brevard Schools Foundation for helping them manage some of their funds and supporting their organization. So check them out online if you want to know more about this program. I hope that as information grows and people learn about mindfulness, that maybe some of our other schools and teachers will start helping their students with this approach. A huge shout out to Love Inc. That's an organization within our community of I think I looked it up online to get the description of it. I think it's 40 churches within our community come together and try to do service projects. They've adopted University Park Elementary School. And if you've seen any of what's going on there, the news has covered this story. They toured the school with the principal, Anna Diaz, and said, well, what needs to be done around here? And she walked around and she's like, well, pick one. And she showed them, she said, like 40 projects. And they came back to her and said they were going to do all 40. And in the interview, she said she sat in her car in the parking lot and cried for 2 hours till her face like hurt so bad from crying of gratitude for what they've done. And I think it was Channel 13 was in there, and they had videos of painting 40 rooms. I mean, they are just overhauling that school and putting love into it. But she said the greatest thing is the kids feel like they matter because people are donating their time and they're around campus doing things. And so I want to make sure that we recognize them and maybe encourage others to, if you have an organization that also might want to adopt a school and do some of the things around there that the kids will see you on campus and helping out. The last one that I have is Junior Achievement. I attended their annual Black Tie Affair, which was amazing. They had it out at the Cape under the Saturn V rocket. But what was most amazing about the evening, they inducted 2 business people into the Hall of Fame. The most amazing thing about the evening is they had 5 students from Palm Bay Elementary there, and they were dressed in their black tie affair, and they helped greet and direct the adults, and then they were up on stage and they led the invocation, they led the pledge, and they did it with such maturity and grace, and I couldn't have been more proud of our Palm Bay Elementary students, and that's all that I have, John. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Deskovich. Ms. Belford.
Thank you, Mr. Craig. I have just a couple of shout outs this evening. I had the opportunity, City of Titusville has what they call their Titusville Student Advisory Council. And it's made up of leaders from the surrounding schools. And each year they do what's called the Titusville Youth Leadership Summit. And so they bring students from all of the surrounding high schools, and Parrish is gracious enough to provide the space for them. And this year they did such an amazing project. So it's kind of twofold. They're tasked with something they have to achieve as a group. And so they have to achieve this project, but they also in the process have to learn how to work together as a group. And so they're coming from different schools, they don't have any relationship prior to, and they're all put in this room and kind of walked through group development and leadership along with doing a project. And the project this year was actually developed by one of the city staff members, and they were tasked with designing a convention center in Titusville. There had been some talk about needs in the community, and so they were given 3 different plots of land broken up among the groups, and they had to meet setback requirements and water access and number of parking lots per square footage of building, and you name it. They had to work all of this into designing a convention center for the community. And it was a phenomenal process to watch them come together as a group. Certainly a phenomenal process to see them really engage and understand what it takes to achieve things in the community, and also awesome for them to have a voice about what they feel our community needs. They put lots of focus onto things like community pool and rock climbing wall and basketball courts and meeting space, and it was really interesting to see the difference among all of the groups as well as the similarities. So thank you to City of Titusville for giving that opportunity to our students and to Parrish for providing that space as well. On the 3rd, Mr. Susan and I attended the Odyssey of the Mind regional competition. Was hosted over here at Vieira High School. And what a fun group. If you've never been to an Odyssey of the Mind competition, you should certainly be there. I have a student that participates in Odyssey of the Mind, so I was there volunteering during the day and then went back for the award ceremony at night. Mr. Susan came in while I was running home to change from mom attire to school board member attire for the award ceremony. So definitely want to give a shout out to those schools that will now be going to the state tournament at UCF representing Brevard. So Central Middle School, Stone Magnet Middle School, Manatee Elementary, Viera Charter, Harbor City Elementary, McNair Magnet, Challenger 7, Pinewood, Oak Park, Mims, Space Coast, Ralph Williams, Turner, West Melbourne School for Science, Sculptor Charter, West Shore, Odyssey Charter, Melbourne High School, and Holy Trinity Lower School will be representing Brevard at the next competition at UCF. So congratulations to all of them. The other thing I want to say about that shout out is when I showed up for the award ceremony that night, the organizers were so incredibly appreciative, and they said, we have been doing this event for 30 years, and we've never had a school board member attend. And so they were just over the moon excited that Mr. Susan was there, and I was there, and Bill Maharis had shown up during the day as well, and so appreciative of just the participation from leadership. So thank you, Mr. Susan, for being there that day. But I also want to say to our other groups in the district that maybe have not had leadership visit, we don't always know, and we can't always make everything, but if you send out an invite to us and say, hey, would you please consider joining us, we will certainly do our best to be there, because we don't want any of our student groups to feel like they are not important to us. So please don't hesitate to do that outreach. And then I'm going to put one last plug in. This Saturday, the 17th, we have the Community Carnival and the Out of the Darkness Walk taking place at Sandpoint Park. That is from, I think, sign up starts at 8 o'clock on Saturday, and it runs to 2 or 4 on Saturday. But that is our suicide awareness event. So if anyone is available to join us, we would certainly encourage you to be there. And I think that's all I have.
Thank you, Ms. Belford. Mr. Ziegler.
Thank you, Mr. Craig. Continuing on the science STEM path, I'm going to be giving a shout out to the robotics teams. But first, a little something about Brevard County and science. So in Brevard County, we have 2.6% of the students in the state. Typically, we take over 33% of the science awards in the state. And we did even better than that previous weekend. There was an event at the Orlando Science Center. 9 counties competed in 16 categories. Brevard took first place in 8 out of the 16 categories. Way to go, Brevard schools. Excellent. So this past weekend was the First Robotics Orlando Regional. First Robotics is an international robotics program. The students get their kits and instructions on what the program is, the game. In January, they have 6 weeks to build, and then there's a drop-dead date there wherever they are, that's it. And then they go off to the regionals to compete against teams from all over the world. And I started at the luncheon there, and the real reason I want to mention this is the speaker, very impressive, because we have 3D printers in our schools. This speaker has a company called Limitless, L-I-M-B, like your limb, Limitless. And you never guess what he makes with his 3D printer. He makes robotic prosthetics with a 3D printer for kids. How unbelievably impressive. So we had 4 teams that finished in the top 15 out of 65 teams. Team 21 Combat from Astronaut and Titusville took 4th place. Team 36 Voltage, Melbourne and West Shore took 8th place. Team 801 Horsepower from Merritt Island, Cocoa Beach and Edgewood took 12th place. And Team 233 Pink team from Rockledge, Viera, and also has some Cocoa Beach students there, took 15th place. And Melbourne High School, Team 36, got the Judges Award. And we ever remember Major Moros? She was there with her husband working with Team Horsepower, and their son, Dawson Moros, got the Dean's Award. Very, very, very impressive. And you know, we talk about all these STEM programs, career programs, robotics, and we all think fairly narrow-mindedly about what a robot is. Well, we have for you a short little video that I got to see, and we're going to show you now of what it's called Not a Machine, or it's not a robot. I'm sorry, not a robot. And this is very interesting what this does for our kids. Thank you, Matt.
This isn't a robot. It very well may have hydraulic arms, a drivetrain, and a circuit board, but this isn't a robot. This is a lesson in humility, hard work, and collaboration. This is a CrossFit workout. for the muscle upstairs. This is an apple for the next generation of Newtons. It's a lot of things, but this isn't a robot. This is a roadmap that leads straight to engineering. This is a rock to shatter 1,000 glass ceilings, a rope to pull a generation up and out of poverty, a sledgehammer to break down cultural barriers, and a universal language spoken in every nation on earth. And because of that, this is a compass that can help point the way to peace. But please, don't think this is just a robot. This is Glastonbury for technology. This is mission control for the next moonshot. This is the Rosetta Stone to help translate the future. This is the sport that will help us win tomorrow. This is the software to program ourselves to cure cancer, build a clean engine, or step foot on Mars. But this isn't a robot. It's a machine to build the people who will change the world.
And why we support robotics and all these other STEM programs, so much more than just the robot. Thank you for that.
That's great. Thank you, Mr. Ziegler. And it's funny watching that video. I actually judged the competition, the first robotics competition, that one with the castle scaling and all that a couple years ago. So it was pretty cool to see some of the teams that were there. That is an amazing thing. I encourage any of my fellow board members to get involved with FIRST. It's a really, really cool opportunity for the students, but for us to just be able to marvel at what they come up with. Quickly, I'll just go through a couple quick things. We had a joint audit committee meeting that included the board. We do that once a year. We have the entire joint audit committee. Our joint audit committee is a group of 5 volunteers that put their hard work and time into ensuring that there is a continuity of auditing trail from the outside. They're the interface with our outside auditors. They're our interface with our inside auditors, and they provide that checks and balance to us. And I just think that the work that they do, Art Edwards and his team do, is kind of under the radar. But we do appreciate each and every one of them for spending the amount of time that they do to be involved in our organization. 7th of March, Governor Scott awarded our own Jane Erguez from Saturn Elementary, the Superstars out at Saturn, with the Governor's Shine Award, one of 8 teachers to be recognized in the state of Florida. She was our last year's Teacher of the Year. And so congratulations to her. That's an amazing accomplishment. She continues to represent Brevard so well, and the work she does in her kindergarten classroom there at Saturn is amazing. Thank you so much to Dane Theodore and his facilities team and the work that they did to facilitate in facilities, the building of the Roosevelt, the rebuild of the Roosevelt Elementary Playground out in Cocoa Beach. It was one of our first attempts at our school improvement program, where we as the community raises money, and the municipality, Cocoa Beach, raised some money, put in it, much like the track at Satellite High School that we were able to complete this last week. The same thing happened out at Roosevelt, and we were able to go out there, and we had a whole team of volunteers out there building under the supervision of a general contractor, and it was just outstanding. And so now we have a great public resource out there at Roosevelt for the kids and for the community. And lastly, because I knew that those of you that didn't watch till the end last week, or 2 weeks ago, I forgot to mention our great Merritt Island women's soccer team. I mentioned them then, but I want to make sure that now we have a fuller audience. Back-to-back 3A women's soccer champions, amazing accomplishment, and that team is full of promise for probably another run next year. So congratulations to them. And I think that's all I have. Dr. Blackbird, do you have anything?
Thank you, Mr. Craig. First and foremost, Mr. Ziegler, as you were showing the robotics video, I was thinking about tomorrow being a major, major holiday in the lives of math, science junkies. The one time at the University of Florida where math majors and engineering majors would come together and celebrate the same day, and that's Pi Day. March 14th, every day, the first three numbers of pi on March 14th. I guess we don't have a lot of math and science enthusiasts in the room, but it's a very special day for us math geeks. So I just wanted to bring that to everyone's attention. And the two of the items, I think Mr. Craig, you mentioned the playground at Roosevelt and the track at Satellite Beach. Two great examples of municipalities, schools, community members, business leaders, and then the school system supplementing efforts in order to get special projects done. I think maybe a year and a half ago when we first came up with this idea, there was some concern about opening Pandora's box and doing, being pressured to do more than we have the capacity to do. Well, I can't think of a better way to be pressured to do more than we think we could do by facilitating communities, municipalities, business owners, doing their own fundraising around priorities, and then forcing us to match that effort. I'm looking forward to what other communities and other schools will do as well. I want to give a shout out to the Human Resources Division, Leadership Development. On March 10th, we held our first LEAD conference. This conference, with sessions presented by our Level 5 leaders, showcased current leadership research and best practices to current and future administrators. Over 160 people came out and participated. Each session was at capacity, and the feedback was very positive. Shifting now to a brief high-level update from our legislative session that closed this past weekend. First thing I want to say, I believe the board will agree with this, before I mention anything about our legislative update, I think we have the best set of legislators in the entire state, right? We certainly don't always agree, but what we do have is a phenomenal relationship. We're able to talk to them. Our kids travel to Tallahassee with us and speak with our legislators. So definitely want to send an appreciative word out to Representatives Fine, Altman, Placencia, and Goodson, and Senators Mayfield and Huckel for just constant partnership with us through a very difficult time in the legislature. So now I want to talk about a few highlights. I'll start with one that is specific to Brevard County that Senate President Joe Negron and Speaker of the House Richard Corcoran, along with our local delegates, really helped to usher through, and that is our appropriation for a $1.5 million advanced manufacturing and welding training center that will be at Adult Education's Clear Lake campus in Cocoa. Mr. Arnott back there will be the leader of that program, and that will give us some necessary resources to work with our adult students to help them grow in a career and help them gain high-skill, high-wage jobs in this local economy, in this local community. So that's pretty huge. A couple of major bills that will have impact here in Brevard that was approved this weekend as well. First and foremost, the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School Public Safety Act was signed by Governor Scott on Friday. Some high-level pieces of that. It requires police resource officers at all schools, not the 1 per 1,000 student standard, and meaning BPS will have to add them at more than 40 elementary schools. The bill also creates a recurring appropriation for mental health services on campuses throughout the entire state, something that, by the way, several weeks before the unfortunate tragedy down south, our student government leaders of their own free will and accord came up with this and traveled to Tallahassee with the board members. Now, I want to say they led us around the Capitol to plea for legislators to appropriate dollars for mental health around the entire state, and that was, again, prior to the tragedy. This bill also requires active shooter training and drills for all students and staff. This bill makes it a second-degree felony to post on social media or otherwise transmit a threat of a mass shooting or act of terrorism. And this bill enables and funds a school marshal program, which differs slightly from the program that Sheriff Ivey is proposing to the district, but that's part of the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School Public Safety Act. On Sunday, Governor Scott approved HB 7055, known as the Omnibus Education Policy Bill. Several of the highlights of that bill, several of the components of that bill: one, establishes the HOPE Scholarship Program for students who are victims of bullying or violence or sexual offenses to transfer to another public school or to get a scholarship to attend a private school. Schools will have 14 days in which to complete the bullying investigation. This bill mandates paper and pencil standardized tests for 7th and 8th grade language arts and math by year 2019-2020. This bill requires teachers' unions to apply for recertification by the state if their paid membership drops below 50%. And this bill changes some eligibility around rules for charter schools. Last but not least, as far as the budget is concerned, the legislature approved the state's budget on Sunday and sent it to our governor. It hasn't been signed by the governor yet, but Brevard's share of the legislative approved budget calls for approximately $8.3 million increased funding over this fiscal year. Included in that is the additional funding of $2.4 million for the additional resource officers and $1.7 million for the mental health assistance for students. So when you remove those two categories, the $8.3 million, which is effectively a 1.5% increase, turns out to be about $4.2 million, which is now a 0.82% increase over the resources we have this year. So there are additional resources and for security and mental health, but I will continue to tell you that the resources being pumped into education still isn't enough, right, to accomplish everything that we want to see happen. As far as those two bills, House Bill 7026 and House Bill 7055, along with the budget, staff will spend many, many sleepless nights in the days and weeks to come, carefully analyzing all of those bills and our budget, and we'll be able to give more updates to the board and to the public at subsequent meetings.
Thank you, Dr. Blackburn. That brings us to the adoption of the agenda. Back to you, sir.
Mr. Craig and members of the board, on this evening's agenda, we have administrative staff recommendations, 17 consent items, 4 action items, and 1 information item. You also have the yellow supplemental agenda, which are changes made to the agenda since being released to the public. A revision was made to item A7 on administrative staff recommendations, item F10 on student expulsions, and item F17 on suspension of instructional employee were additions.
What are the wishes of the board?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Susan, seconded by Ms. Belford. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, please vote. Motion passes 5-0. Dr. Blackburn, will you please let us know about the administrative staff recommendations?
Yes, sir. Mr. Craig, there is 1 administrative staff recommendation for the board to consider.
What are the wishes of the board?
Move to approve.
Moved by Mr. Susan, seconded by Ms. Deskovich. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, please vote. Motion passes 5-0. We are now at public comments. The maximum allowed time for each speaker is 3 minutes. Please be reminded that statements shall be directed to the board chair. No person may address or question board members individually. The board chairperson may interrupt, warn, or terminate a participant's statement when the statement is too lengthy, personally directed, abusive, obscene, or irrelevant. If an individual does not observe reasonable decorum, the board chairperson may request that individual leave the meeting. Please keep in mind that we often have children present and/or children viewing our board meetings, and we encourage an environment appropriate for their viewing. And while no action will be taken by the board on items raised in public discussion, board members may assist with connecting public speakers to district staff that can assist with concerns, respond in brief to comments made by speakers that require immediate clarification, and request that a staff member respond more fully following the board meeting. These responses and requests will take place at the end of the public comment portion of the meeting. Tonight we have 48 public speakers. And in accordance with our board policy, we're going to take 10 speakers at this time. And then if you look on your agendas, after our consent and action items, we will hear the rest of the board, rest of the public presentations where you see letter J, additional public presentations if required. And that's due to our policy in order to get through our business. I'm also going to identify a couple of speakers that are speaking on items that are relevant to the agenda tonight and or outside of the most of the other topics which are considered about school safety, arming individuals, and Project Stomp in a variety of different fashions. So I'm going to call the first few. I'll call you in groups of 3. We'll start with Vanessa Skipper, followed by Vita Penicus and Anthony Colucci. You have 3 minutes, and we have a new podium, so hopefully it's not too confusing. It's a beautiful podium. And we do thank our staff for putting it in. If you have an issue with it, please let us know. We do have a new clock that has 3 minutes that'll count down. You'll hear a little beep in the tone. At that time, I'll be asking you to wrap up your comments, so please keep attention to that clock. We'll start with Ms. Skipper, Ms. Panikas, and Mr. Colucci.
Good evening, members of the board and Dr. Blackburn. We've all heard the old adage, just because you can doesn't mean you should. The legislature legislated bonuses for highly effective and effective teachers during the legislative session last year. Many teachers received an email from the district stipulating what their bonus would be based on their evaluation last year, and then how much money would be actually deposited after the district and employee fringe was deducted. Other counties were able to pay these bonuses out as supplements, whereby increasing the amount teachers actually received. I understand that our district can take fringe out and can pay this as a bonus, but that doesn't mean they should have when there were other options available that would have put more money into teachers' pockets. I spoke a few meetings ago about how we must do better for raises next year. A couple of you are on the campaign trail. Please refrain from celebrating the one decent raise you work to give educators unless it's your plan to repeat it this year. Also, please refrain from celebrating the one decent raise unless you are going to also highlight the many years our pay was frozen in this district. Also, please refrain from celebrating the one decent raise unless you are also going to mention how teachers were stripped of their much-needed planning time to balance an $11 million deficit. This district must do better for teachers and salary increases this year. We can no longer accept funding from Tallahassee as an excuse, especially since this board and superintendent has been so complimentary of our delegation's performance despite another stagnant allocation this session. Quote, "We have the best legislators in the state." If you're not making noise about funding to our delegation, please don't come to the table with noise about not having money to give the educators of this county a decent raise, one that more than exceeds a cost of living increase and substantially exceeds the rate of inflation. I look forward to returning to the table and participating in good faith bargaining. I look forward to returning to the table and having campaign promises, both former and present, realized. When you're deciding on funding, remember, just because you can fund something frivolous like armored cars,
doesn't mean you should. I look forward to teachers getting a decent raise this year and next year and the year after that that catches us up to where we should be despite having the budget balanced on our back for so many years. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pennicus.
My name's Vida Pennicus. I'm usually a lot more prepared than I am today, so bear with me. I watched Dr. Blackburn, Dr. Thede, and Ms. Belford on Space Coast Daily's TV program a few weeks ago discussing mental health. And I applaud your efforts, and I applaud the legislature for finally appropriating specific funds to help those efforts. However, today I ended up in the crosshairs of a situation, and it occurred to me that there's something that we can do to help students struggling with mental health issues right this minute, right now, today, or tomorrow morning at 8:30 in the morning. FA appeals. Let's streamline them. You know who's absent? Kids who are struggling with mental health. One school has 279 FA appeals right now in a school of 1,300 students. That's 21% of the student body filed an FA appeal. Guess what the statistic for teen depression is? 20%. That's no coincidence. You've got a high-risk pool of people that you can reach out to immediately by just looking through your FA appeals piles. When I say streamline it, I mean if a child has an IEP or a 504 or known mental health issues that have been documented already, if the teachers say, okay, let them pass, give them the appeal. Don't even send it to a committee. Let them do it. I know I'm not the only person this affects. I know it affects other people, but I can only tell you my story. My son FA'd last term because we have a new administrator. The administrator did not know my son, did not know my son's record, even though it's all there. And so my son was put on a contract. So this past term, we spent every day stressing over whether or not he was gonna FA. And if we took an extra day, what doctor can we take him to that's gonna give us a note today to excuse today's absence? All this stress pushed my child into crisis. My gifted, talented student is very seriously considering dropping out of high school. This is something we can fix now. Give students relief, give parents relief with these ridiculous FA appeals, please.
Thank you. Anthony Colucci, followed by Betsy Bray and Carolyn Perrine.
My name is Anthony Colucci. I'm the Vice President of the Brevard Federation of Teachers. Yesterday, I went to the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services building in Orlando with my wife, two-year-old and 8-year-old. We were greeted at the door by 3 professional law enforcement agents. They had us remove our shoes, belts, and jewelry. Then we individually walked through a metal detector. Once inside, I felt safe. I was not at all concerned about myself or my family being shot. Think about it for a second. Why did that facility have professional law enforcement agents and a metal detector? Why is it not okay for everyone in that building to be armed and defend themselves old Wild West style? Why not save some taxpayer money and let the clerk who was meticulously checking over our paperwork have a gun strapped to her ankle, ready to go? We know how to keep kids safe. The truth is the commitment to fund kids' safety is not there. So instead, the idea of arming teachers is touted as a solution without any evidence to support it. The fact is, guns in schools don't increase safety. They are more likely to lead to accidental shootings. A Taylorsville, Utah teacher was shot on September 12, 2014, when her concealed weapon accidentally discharged in a campus bathroom. 2 people were wounded at a high school graduation ceremony in Kansas after a man adjusted a sock he had stuffed a pistol into. In November 2012, a University of Colorado employee accidentally shot herself and a colleague while she was showing her gun to coworkers. In Idaho State University, assistant professor shot himself in the foot in a classroom full of students in September 2014 with a semi-automatic handgun that discharged accidentally in his pocket. A Weber State University student accidentally shot himself on campus in 2012. 2016, a Tarleton State University student accidentally fired a gun in a residence hall on campus. A Utah Valley University student sitting near a Taco Bell on April 25th, 2017, reached into his backpack and accidentally fired a gun. A former police officer, now a criminal justice professor at Long Island University, accidentally shot himself in the leg in November 2011. A Texas school worker was shot in a handgun training session on school property in 2013 when a certified person attempted to fix a malfunction in the handgun. It misfired anyway, hitting the worker. A gun safety instructor accidentally fired a handgun inside a Minnesota school just before class began. A school worker accidentally shot a student in a high school parking lot in Aurora, Colorado. An ex-police officer firearms instructor accidentally shot himself outside an Iowa school. And on and on and on. It cannot fit in 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Colucci.
Thank you.
I appreciate your time. Betsy Bray, followed by Caroline Perrine and Oscar Rivera.
Good evening, members of the board. I know you have a long night ahead of you. I looked at your agenda and I thought you were going to be here till midnight, so I'll be very brief. My name is Betsy Bray. I live in Cocoa Beach and I have 2 teenagers, one at Mel High. So I think you already know that arming teachers doesn't make much sense. I'm guessing that most of you already know that. You deal with education, you deal with studies, you deal with research, and all of the research shows right now that arming teachers and having armed personnel on the schools doesn't make any difference in these shootings. At the Pulse shooting, there were many people that had concealed weapons, and it did nothing at all. And in Parkland, there were military personnel there that did nothing. It just did nothing. It doesn't make a difference. A mentally ill student without a weapon is just a student that needs help. It's not a deadly situation, it's a kid that needs help. So we've got to take the weapons out of the story, the assault weapons out of the story. So far, the school boards in Broward County, Duval County, and Hillsborough counties have adopted formal statements opposing the idea of arming school personnel. A majority of the Pasco County board members have also said no, we're not going to arm our personnel. They've stood up and they've said no. And among the state's 12 biggest counties, only Brevard County leaders are seriously considering a proposal to arm school staff. And I ask you, is this what you want the legacy of Brevard County to be? Is this really the direction that we want to go? I insist that it is not, that the students are watching us right now. And the parents are watching. And in fact, the whole world is watching you guys right now and what you decide to do on this issue. Not just Brevard County, not just the state of Florida, but the whole world is paying attention to this issue right now and what you are going to do about arming teachers. So I encourage you to all take the act, the courageous act, to make a public statement and to say, no, we're not going to arm our teachers. It's not the solution to the problem. So please make a public statement, please do the right thing, and I thank you very much.
Caroline Perrine, Oscar Rivera, and Ms. Gorgon.
Hi, my name is Carolyn Perrine. When she was 2, my daughter almost died Wusthof and Rockledge saved her life. After it was over, they told me it was the worst anaphylactic reaction they had ever seen. She's graduating high school and earning an AA from EFSC this spring. She's attending UCF in the fall, and she's never once stepped foot in Brevard Public Schools. When it was time to start thinking about kindergarten, I spoke with parents, teachers, and administrators. I found out there was no school board policy dealing with food allergies. Instead, each school could decide what they wanted for safety protocol, or lack of safety protocol. Nobody banned peanuts, so forgive the analogy. But my daughter would have to attend school every day with hundreds of children carrying loaded guns. Would they come near her with it? Would she react? Would it be fatal? Would they do it on purpose or just by accident? At one school, locally, 5-year-olds were required to carry EpiPens in a box. They were responsible for taking it to PE, art, and the cafeteria, but it had to be locked because other kids might get into it, and the key had to be kept in the office. Most of the schools required EpiPens to be in the nurse's office, locked, and only staffed 2 days a week. So if she reacted Monday or Wednesday between 8 and noon, we were good. I was told teachers generally didn't keep EpiPens. They do enough already, it's too much liability. What if they misread a reaction? What if they administered when they shouldn't have? What if they didn't administer when they should? What if another child in the classroom got hold of it? It wasn't a question of training or money or protecting students. It didn't matter if an individual teacher wanted to do it. Teachers across the county weren't allowed. Do you know how long you have once you hear the shots being fired to process what's happening and then react to a shooter? I imagine it's seconds. Thankfully, I don't know. You get a minute if you're lucky. It's about how long you get with an anaphylactic reaction. Yet teachers can't be asked to protect food allergy students. Now you're considering guns. Who's going to accept the liability when a student gets a hold of it? When the teacher misreads the situation and shoots the wrong person, or when a teacher reads the situation correctly, decides they don't want to die, and doesn't use their quaint little handgun against a maniac with an AR-15. Do you really want our children to grow up surrounded by guns, living in fear, filled with anxiety? Just like an EpiPen is a constant reminder of what if, a gun will constantly remind small children of what if. What if someone wants to kill me today? It boggles the mind you'd even consider allowing teachers and staff to carry guns when they can't carry epinephrine. I swear if I had a kindergartner now, I would pull her out to homeschool her just to keep her away from that environment. And I'm sure you're gonna have parents who take that option, and that's okay. Send them to me, I can show them how it's done. Thank you.
Oscar Rivera, Arlene Gorgon, and Megan Stolen.
Good evening, Dr. Blackburn, school board members, and concerned citizens. I'm here to ask you, the school board, to say no to arming school personnel. My name is Oscar Rivera, and I'm a resident of Merritt Island in your district, Mr. Craig. I want to share with you my 3 personal perspectives on this very personal matter. First of all, I'm a parent of 2 school-age children, one in elementary school and another one in middle school, both in a great public school system. I do not want to see any school personnel carry a gun unless they are deputy or a school resource officer, period, non-negotiable. Second, my wife is a school teacher and has been teaching for over 20 years. She has an undergrad and a graduate degree in education. Her job description is to educate children, not to carry a gun to work. She should not be carrying a gun to work because she's not a school resource officer or deputy. She is a school teacher, period. The third perspective I want to share as a licensed clinical social worker is that as a social worker, our job is to assess situation in a micro, meso, and macro perspective, identify the issue, and come up with creative solution to fix the problem. Arming school personnel is not fixing the problem. Adding more guns in school is not fixing the problem, period. So what to do? First, you should join the other 10 largest school districts in Florida and doing the right thing. According to the Tampa Bay Times, which says, and I quote, officials in 10 of the state's largest systems, which educate nearly 60% of all Florida school children, say they have no intention on giving teachers or other staff guns to carry into classroom. Among the state's 12 biggest districts, only Brevard County leaders are seriously considering a proposal to arm school staff. End of quote. Consider this first step. Do what students, teachers, and our community want. What to do next? We can create a community-based program where we can identify volunteers who want to make school a safe place for students, teachers, and staff. You can reach out to groups and offer them an opportunity to be hall monitors, parking monitors, cross guards around and near the schools, and give them a radio, not a gun. Collaborating with the school resource officers for education and clarity on safety plans. And finally, what to do next? Honor the class size amendment that Floridians voted for in 2002. Hire more social workers in the school system to identify mental health needs early on and provide early intervention. And if you have teachers or staff in the school that want to carry a gun, please encourage them to join the local police department or our military. Those people need guns to effectively complete their jobs. Thank you for the opportunity to address the board, and thank you for your consideration of making our school a safe place without guns.
Thank you, Mr. Rivera. Before our next speaker begins, I just want to remind everybody that this is still a public meeting, and I would request that I know you're excited and passionate about things, and that's great, but you're just cutting into each other's time, and we are trying to take notes, and we're trying to maintain some professional decorum. So I understand you want to cheer, but this probably isn't the place for that, because this is a very serious matter. It's not a cheering matter. So let's have a professional discussion about what it is that you're bringing to the table, because that's what we'd request, so that we can actually take some notes and figure out how to move forward. Thank you. Miss Arlene Gorgon, Megan Stolen, and Cabriana Williams.
Good evening. The most important and rewarding responsibility of my life has been raising my two daughters. I chose to live in this county, believing that Brevard Public Schools would be a wonderful educational system for my children. I have been an involved parent, a member of the PTO, an instructional assistant at Manatee Elementary, and co-chair of Rockledge High School project graduation class of 2016 that raised over $70,000 to keep our children safe on graduation night. I really do care. To me, the decision to allow or not allow school personnel to have guns on school campuses is common sense. Firstly, how do you think a handgun in the hands of a frightened, surprised individual will stop an adrenaline-infused person with much stronger, faster weapons? Would you want teachers to leave the students that they are trying to protect to have a gunfight with a mentally unstable person? I can almost guarantee you that they won't win that fight, and more lives will be lost because those trying to protect our children will be gone and possibly dead. Another perspective is from my daughter, who turned 20 years old today and attended Brevard Public Schools her entire life. A school is a place of safety, community, and education. For many students, it's the only meal and kind face they'll see all day. Students are already living in fear because of the constant reminders of children being murdered in schools in the United States. How will they feel and react to the knowledge that their teachers and other staff members are carrying guns and have the power to shoot anyone at any moment? Also, highly trained weapons specialists have died when faced with unknown attacks. How many minimally trained civilians would be able to adequately defend themselves in similar situations? It's a disaster in all respects. Please, I ask you to give deep thought on your vote, not to make a decision based on your personal political beliefs, and think of the children that you are representing. Please do not implement the provisions of the Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School Public Safety Act that would arm school personnel. Thank you for your time and your open minds.
Thank you. Megan Stolen, Cabriana Williams, and Sheila Logan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the board. I'm a little nervous. Thank you for letting me speak. I am the mom of two amazing children who attend Edgewood Junior Senior High School. I'm here to speak for myself, my husband, and my 2 kids, all of whom strongly disagree with the idea of having guns in schools. You will hear many arguments against this idea, but I offer one here because it's one that you don't hear much about, and it's something that's very dear to my heart. I want you to consider the tragedy of suicide by cop. Suicide by cop is the attempt by a suicidal person who is unable to manage to hurt themselves directly to call in a threat or approach an officer or other armed person, which garners a response from law enforcement that ends with the shooting by the officer. The mentally ill person is often unarmed or the weapon is disguised as a threat. Sometimes they leave a note afterwards to apologize to the officer afterward. The loss of life often results in severe after effects for the officer, such as PTSD. So my question to you is, if this can happen to suicidal people when trained officers are involved, how will this be avoided by arming school staff with minimal firearm training, little to no mental health awareness training, and no hostage negotiation training when a young suicidal person decides that today is the worst day of their life? We need to leave these life and death decisions in the hands of trained police officers, first responders, and mental health counselors and negotiators. We need to spend the funds allocated by the new state law to finally address mental health issues in our schools. We need to ask for the state to pass red flag laws or extreme risk protective orders, which will prevent future school shootings as well as firearm-related suicides. We need more school psychologists, more safe places for kids, and more training for teachers to recognize suicidal kids and to get them real help. We need common sense changes to school facilities that help minimize the threats to students' health and well-being, and more school resource officers. We need to institute programs in schools so that kids know there is help for them. We need our kids to see teachers and staff as mentors and people that they can rely on to keep them safe, even on their darkest days. Not as armed guards watching over them, with one eye on the whiteboard and the other on the open window. I strongly urge you to quickly dismiss the idea of arming school staff and to move quickly to be proactive in real measures that will keep our schools safe and happy places for learning and growing. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Gabriana Williams and Sheila Logan.
Hi, I'm Capriana Williams from Cocoa High School. I'm a sophomore. And what's been going on in schools today is really horrifying. It's like violence in schools have become a trend. School administrators and faculty have been trying to create ways and keep everyone safe in a situation similar to the Parkland massacre. Out of all the solutions, teachers being armed is the best choice. Would this actually protect us or hurt us? Knowing that a gun is now accessible in schools just gives students or teachers a faster approach to do whatever heinous acts they have in mind. For example, recently at a high school in Atlanta, a teacher who was having a bad day locked himself in this classroom with a gun and fired it. What is it to say that this can happen again, or even worse? What if a teacher who was able to hold a concealed weapon was trying to break up a student fight? How would this situation play out? Would the fact of knowing that teachers having guns in schools change the way we act? I am personally terrified about this proposal. It is unsettling to me, it is unsettling to me to think about having guns in my classroom with the teacher. I would not feel comfortable in my learning environment, a place where I should be comfortable and feel safe, wondering if my teacher has a gun or not. We as people are supposed to express ourselves and show our individuality, but at the same time, should we be afraid of doing so? Not acting like ourselves, knowing we could easily intimidate someone with one word could change who we are. Prior to making this decision, Please put yourselves in our shoes. I am zealous about learning, but how can I do that when I'm worried about my school being unsafe? How would you feel as a student today in your school? Safe or not safe at all? Thank you.
And finally, Sheila Logan.
Good evening. I'm also here to talk about the idea of arming school personnel. I'm only going to share two of my concerns, though I have a myriad of concerns. My first concern is the nature of children. Children are very curious, and many are fascinated with guns beyond what you would expect. Think of a child in elementary school with poor impulse control. It might seem like a good idea to try to get the gun from whoever has it on the campus. And right now you're thinking, well, it won't be known, but my experience after 29 years in the system is it will be known who has the guns. Maybe not the first day, but by 1 week, everyone will know. Then that's elementary. Let's talk about high school, older kids, middle school. What about the very angry student or the suicidal student? It might make sense to get that gun at any cost. So when that's happening, what's going to happen? Is the teacher or administrator going to shoot the student? And if that happens, I don't think students are going to be safer at school. My other concern is the nature of the people carrying the gun. I think it was Sheriff Ivey suggested perhaps former law enforcement and former military people would be well equipped to do that. In the last week, a former veteran killed the 3 psychologists involved in his care, and a Brevard County Sheriff's deputy was arrested for many laws being broken. There is no way we can guarantee any group automatically is safe and well fit to carry guns in the presence of children. Sometimes I've heard people say, well, classroom teachers are busy, so we'll have coaches and custodians, counselors and administrators have the guns. Well, is there any more agreement that, or a promise that they're safer? Will there be a psych eval for who's going to carry a gun? And the 2 examples I gave were flukes. Most sheriff's deputies and most military are wonderful people. So are most students. A school shooter is a fluke. You can never know what's inside someone else. More guns in school will make children less safe. Thank you.
Okay, that was our first 10, and we will move on with our agenda and then return back to public comment here, and it should not be too long. We don't have a whole bunch of business. That moves us into the consent agenda. Dr. Blackburn.
There are 17 agenda items under this category, 1 with information.
Thank you, Dr. Blackburn. Does any board member wish to pull any items?
No, sir.
Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to accept the consent items that were, with none pulled for discussion, the entire consent agenda.
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Susan, seconded by Ms. Deskovich. Is there any discussion? Please vote. Hearing none, please vote. Motion passes 5-0. We'll now move on to the action agenda. Dr. Blackburn?
We have 4 items. First is item G26 on purchasing solicitations.
What are the wishes of the board?
Move to approve. Second.
Moved by Mr. Susan, seconded by Mr. Ziegler. Is there any discussion?
No, sir.
Hearing none, please vote. And motion passes 5-0. Dr. Blackburn?
Next is item G27 on job description data quality specialist.
What are the wishes of the board?
Move to approve. Second.
Moved by Mr. Susan, seconded by Mr. Ziegler. Is there any discussion?
No,
Hearing
sir.
none, please vote. Motion passes 5-0. Dr. Blackburn?
We are now at item G28 on job description administrative technician.
What are the wishes of the board?
Move to approve. Second.
Moved by Mr. Susan, seconded by Mr. Ziegler. Any discussion? Hearing none, please vote. Motion passes 5-0. Dr. Blackburn?
And last item is G29 on adult education part-time teacher salary increases.
What are the wishes of the board?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Susan, seconded by Mr. Ziegler. Any discussion? Hearing none, please vote. And motion passes 5-0. Well, now,
Break before the next 40 speakers.
we will move on to the information agenda, which includes items for board review and will be brought back for action at a subsequent meeting. No action will be taken on these items tonight. Dr. Blackburn.
There is one item under the information category.
Does any member wish to discuss H30? Hearing none. We are back to our regularly scheduled public speakers. I do have a couple requests for a short break, so we will take a 10-minute break and resume at 6:55. We are in recess. And welcome back. Thank you very much for everyone's patience and for sticking around, and we're looking forward to hearing from everybody that is left on our list. And just to clarify, we just want to make sure we hear you. We want to make sure we hear your names. We all take a variety of notes. We try and hit the key points that each speaker brings to the table so that we can go back and look at those things. So it's really critical that we get the information and we understand exactly what it is you're saying. So we appreciate your assistance in that regard. Just to remind everybody, we've got a 3-minute timer here. I will call everybody up in groups of 3.
Mr. Craig.
Mr. Craig.
I'm sorry, I have
Point
to
of order.
interrupt.
Point of order.
Point of order. We have a priority here. It's Misty Belford's birthday, we just found out.
Yes, I know it is Miss Belford's birthday.
Yeah, and we can't think of anything better than to embarrass her in front of the public right now with a little happy birthday, if everybody will join us.
And we appreciate all you coming out for her birthday. So,
Then, does Mr. Reed get to sing happy birthday, lead us in happy birthday?
Mr. Reed, how are we doing back there?
Mr.
Caroline?
Reed, could you lead us in the pledge of happy
Caroline?
birthday? No, we're good to go. Ready? Happy
Happy birthday to you.
Cha, cha, cha.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Misty Belford.
Happy
birthday to you. Cha, 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 cha.
Thank you, team and audience. I appreciate the birthday wishes.
How old?
You want to still have a job, right?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am, I do.
And we're just blessed that you've chosen to spend your birthday evening with us tonight, so thank you. All right, back to business. We'll start with our first 3, Daniel Batchelder, Dina Derman, and Elizabeth Logan.
Good evening. My name is Daniel Batchelder. I'm here as a parent. Brevard County is home to the internationally renowned Space Coast. It is a technologically advanced county that must provide high-quality, advanced social services to its deserving residents. But at the heart of Brevard County's social services is a public education system under pressure to adopt Neanderthalic reactions to a despicable problem that should not exist. Drivers of that reaction are self-confessed politically incorrect sheriffs that would rather have vigilante justice in war zone school grounds than to stop the problem before it starts. Movies and video games are frequently blamed for the rising tide of violence, and while there is no evidence to support this opinion, it is clear that movies can be blamed for thinking that a good guy with a gun can stop a citizen armed with an AR-15. In reality, if a person armed with an AR-15 burst through a school classroom door, dozens would be dead, dying, or disabled before even the most highly trained professional could get a shot off in reaction. From the military training I have received, I know that close quarter firefights are unpredictable, chaotic, and our kids should be nowhere near them. Brevard County deserves intelligent, simple, proactive solutions to these self-inflicted problems. We do not need short-sighted reactions that inflate the problem and degenerate the effective learning environments of our classrooms and schools. Student learning outcomes will be far better met by happy, talented teachers in portables rather than unheard, unappreciated, underpaid, unhappy teachers stifled in armed compounds resembling prisons. The responsibilities of teachers already far outweigh the compensations they receive. Education is the key to a productive future for this country and our species, but arming teachers is a giant leap in the wrong direction. It is yet another disrespectful step toward piling on more responsibilities on teachers that they do not want, do not have to bear, and would be righteous to refuse. So rather than letting a blustery sheriff and the hysterical shrieks of extremist assault rifle apologists guide any school policies that will harm our children, take the proactive, common sense approach. Opt out of recent state legislation to arm school personnel. Pressure the state legislature to enact a sweeping ban on the sale of assault weapons and restore the pride the Space Coast deserves. This county should be the torchbearers for humanity's future, not the laughingstock of the Western world. Thank you.
Dina Dearman, Elizabeth Logan, Peter Colombo.
Hello, I'm Dina Dearman, and he's a hard act to follow. That was really beautifully put. So I would like to just say ditto and move on. But actually, I am not only a parent of Brevard Public School children in a wonderful system that has benefited them greatly. I have a daughter who just graduated in 2017, and she's a freshman at Florida State. And before you boo, my son is graduating this year, and he will be a freshman starting in the fall at University of Florida. So I can say I'm on both sides. I have been a guidance school counselor in Brevard County since 1996. And when I moved from South Florida to beautiful Brevard County, when I got married, it was a different world. I'd like to say we could go back in time, but for some of you, that'll be too long ago. But in 1996, when I started my career at Satellite High School, it was a different world. I didn't think about my safety back then. We always complained about salaries and, you always wanted the best technology and books, but safety in our schools was just never an issue. So flash forward to 1999. I'm a brand new mom. And those of you who have had babies, you know how emotional and, hormonal you get. I'm holding my infant daughter, who was born on April 13th, 1999. She was 1 week old when I watched Columbine unfold in real time on television. And again, as that very emotional new parent, I held her and I wondered, where is the future of our country going if this is what's happening in our schools? Well, we all know how that turned out, so I'm not going to bore you with all those details. But I do want to flash forward to now, 2018, and say that when I moved here from Parkland, Coral Springs, where my family still lives, I didn't expect that my nephew's senior year, he's a graduate this year from Stoneman Douglas High School, would be markedly different than my son's graduation will be this year. So I just want to quickly give you some ideas, because I don't want to talk about that horrific day and how it affected my family personally, but you can imagine that my nephew's life has been changed forever. Saying this, I do want to give you, because I only have 30 seconds left, some positives. You brought up things we can do in the schools. Mindfulness training is something they've been doing in many, many schools, not just in this country, but abroad. I went to a program in Canada that brought that to mind. Stress reduction, mentoring, extra help and time for teachers, extra planning, mental health counselors. There's so much we can be using the money for good things, not adding guns to teachers. I don't see where that does anything. So thank you, my time's up.
Elizabeth Logan, Peter Colombo, and Trudy Onik.
Superintendent Blackburn, I like pie, so yay for Pie Day. And maybe Misty could have a pie for her birthday. So I'm Ellie Logan. I am a mom of 2, soon to be 3 little girls that are coming up in the Brevard Public School system. My baby is actually attending kindergarten orientation tomorrow. So I've actually never been here before because I'm generally pretty happy with what goes on in the school system. But after what happened in Parkland and within the state legislature, I knew that I had to speak up. First of all, I want to thank you all for what you've done and what you're doing to protect our children. And Superintendent Blackburn, you did the right thing after the tragedy, which was you got together with our local law enforcement to seek guidance and suggestions, and I appreciate that. But I would like to urge you to take Sheriff Ivey's word with a grain of salt. This man wants to arm every citizen, so arming teachers and personnel of the schools probably fits neatly into his plan. I don't think that our students will benefit from arming teachers. Obviously, I'm not alone in that sentiment. And what I urge you guys to do is to consider, so if you're weeding your yard, if you just cut the top off the weed, what happens? It grows back. You have to get it out by the root. So arming teachers or other personnel is just cutting that weed off. You have to get into the sand and dig out that root. So yes, mental health is important, but I also think that gun control is equally as important, and I hope that all of you support measures for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Peter Colombo, Trudy Onik, and John Derrick.
Hi, I'm Pete Colombo, live in West Melbourne, so I vote in District 5. I'm a former teacher, and I'm sure all of you would agree that we want to make policy based on evidence. There's no evidence that shows that arming more people, even law enforcement officers in school, there's no evidence that it's going to make schools safer. You can't find it. There's no research. But there is a lot of evidence that shows introducing more weapons or firearms into a situation will likely lead to more people being shot. I have some of that evidence here. Can I offer this to you as well? Just a bunch of studies that you can take a quick look at. Also, there's very little evidence that good guys with guns take out bad guys with guns. The FBI did a study. For every one justifiable homicide, you get 34 suicides, 78 suicides, 34 criminal homicides, and 2 accidental gun deaths. Even the 2-to-1's not good. Okay, and I'll let you have that as well. And finally, a real bad statistic. If you take all of the active shooter incidents that have happened between 2000 and 2013, they did a study where the incidents where law enforcement actually engaged the shooter, that's not every incident, but in those incidents where they did engage a shooter, in 46% of those incidents, there was a law enforcement casualty. Those are trained law enforcement professionals. 46% of the time, there's a casualty. You want dead teachers, you want dead school personnel, ask them to engage a shooter. Please make policy based on evidence and not on fear. Thank you.
You can give that to the deputy. Thank you, sir. Trudy Onik, John Derrick, Adam Tritt.
Hi, I'm Trudy Onik. I'm a product of Brevard County Schools. I attended Southlake Elementary, Parkway Junior High, Madison Middle School, and graduated from Astronaut High School. My daughter attended Manatee Elementary, Kennedy Middle School, and graduated from Rockledge High. And now I am a bookkeeper at Palm Bay Magnet High School for the last 5 years. I have always supported public schools, specifically Brevard Public Schools. I hope to continue to support them. I love my job. I am asking this board to oppose any effort to arm teachers or staff. Adding guns to any situation increases the chance of escalating a controllable situation to something bad, not to mention the potential for accidents that we've already heard about. Please stand with the many other counties and school boards that have already voted against this and vote this down. Thank you.
John Derrick, Adam Tritt, and Faye Icolzer.
John Derrick, Melbourne Village, Korean War veteran. I carried a pistol of .45 in the Korean War and I never used it. I had a carbine which was good for about 100 yards. I had howitzers that were good for thousands of yards. We never used the close-in pistols. I allude to you, if you arm your staff, a 2-inch barrel pistol to hitting that law officer over there in the corner. What do you think under stress is the ability of a person with a 2-inch barrel gonna do against a 4, 6-inch barrel? You remember the Cruz incident in Palm Bay several years ago. Cruz held the police at bay because they were down there with pistols. He was down there with rifles. So are you, I know I have a law enforcement person in my family in Michigan. He's on active duty. He shoots 100 shells every week in his backyard. How many of our teachers, if you're going to arm, are going to go home and practice shooting that short barrel pistol? I don't think it's practical. Take the guns off the teachers.
Adam Tritt, Faye Eichelser, and Ashley Kellum.
Hello, Adam Tritt. I'm an AP Language Arts teacher and 10th grade honors language arts teacher. One of the things I teach my students is the definition of certain words that we need to understand literature, and one of the words that we use is tragedy. A tragedy is not an unforeseen, awful circumstance. A tragedy is not a death. A tragedy is a very specific definition. It is something that you see coming, you are causing to happen, and yet you walk into it anyway. If you arm teachers, someone's going to take the gun. It's going to get lost. If you arm teachers, a student is going to get hit. If you arm teachers, the gun is going to go off accidentally. Someone will get hit in the crossfire. Someone who isn't supposed to die will die, and people who are being aimed at will not be shot. You will have dead people as a result of this. You've seen this, you've heard the studies, you've heard of the other incidents. It happens. This is not hyperbole. This is actuality. If you arm teachers, you are looking at tragedies, deaths that could have been avoided, that you will cause, knowingly cause. You can see them coming, and they're going to happen. That's really the only thing I want to tell you, that. And I have a short message for my students. They asked me to come here tonight and tell you they do not want to sit in classes where they know the teacher has guns. They do not want to be taught by a teacher who is armed. Thank you.
Faye Eichelser, Ashley Kellum, and Caitlin Thompson. Faye? Faye's not here. Ashley Kellum? Thank you.
My name is Ashley Kellum, and I work with kids every single day. I'm also a certified substitute teacher in the county. I won't bore you with statistics on how adding more guns to an environment creates more violence and increases the likelihood of accidental death. I'm sure that your aides or you yourselves have already been handed this information. Statistics are sterile and personal. They allow you to do your job without actually having to do your job, the empathetic part of it, the part that is complex and nuanced and personal. You do no favors to our economy, to public safety, or to the teachers you employ by pitting the safety of staff and students alike as a tally mark in a column of pros and cons. A prevailing disease that you're attempting to circumvent and pass off to someone else by mistreating symptoms. An inconvenient reality. That's the message you are telling our young people. An inescapable truth. You might die at school. Please turn your pages to chapter 10. You have a test on Friday. Arming English teachers or the gym coach won't win you any favors, especially when you are so hard-pressed to advocate for more pay or better supplies for your teachers and schools. What's your actual agenda here? To alleviate the burden of the public school system by initiating an exodus of parents and students from public to charter and private religious institutions? To absolve yourselves of any guilt by engaging in performative measures? Our schools are prisons now. Adding more guns, more officers, more bars around campuses is just saying the quiet parts out loud. No longer becomes mere illusion, but reality. This is a county I would never wish to teach in, never have my child learn in. To be so wholly dismissed as to have a gun thrown at the issue, you must take the people of this county as fools, as convenient marks deemed for target practice. Tally marks in your columns of pros and cons. Thank you.
Caitlin Thompson, Faye Fernandez, and Christina
My
My name is Caitlin Thompson, and I am a Brevard public school teacher. My job is to serve every student with excellence as the standard. My job is not to carry a deadly weapon on my school's campus. My first teaching job was at a school that was surrounded by Section 8 housing, teaching 6th graders. I began this job in the middle of February last year after graduating in December. Many of my students had not seen life outside of their Section 8 housing, and they were used to witnessing violence, drug abuse, and news crews reporting these horrible incidents. When they were at school, I made sure they knew they were safe. Though I had only been with my students since the middle of February, when we had to go on a code red lockdown in April because there was an active shooter at the Section 8 housing just next to the campus, I knew right away to put my kids in the corner away from windows, put obstacles in front of the door, and arm myself with the only things I had: my love for the students, my courage, and my life if needed. However, I felt confident knowing that we had a student resource officer on campus who regularly walked around and made sure that he had his radio on so he would be notified of any criminal activity in the area. All of the students and teachers had at least some peace of mind during this situation because of our school resource officer's presence. Flashing forward to mid-February 2018, one of the largest school shootings in America happened just hours south of Brevard County. Students watched in horror as their teachers and peers were murdered. Teachers should not go into work fearing for their own lives and the lives of students. Teachers should feel confident and safe in their work environment, just like most people in the workforce. However, the answer is not to give teachers guns. If you want to arm me with a small enough class size that's manageable for me, one human being. Arm me with social-emotional learning mandatorily integrated into our curriculum instead of a 90-minute reading block and a 90-minute math block. Arm me with school counselors who are on call for students who are going through emotional trauma instead of making the counselors sit through countless meetings. Arm me with a resource officer in each building on my campus who has had years of extensive training to carry a weapon. If Brevard County offers guns to teachers, I fear that the teaching shortage will be worse than it is even now, and that parents will remove their students from Brevard County Public Schools. My role as an educator is to serve each student with excellence as my teaching standard. The role of police and resource officers is to protect and serve the citizens of Brevard County. There should be no crossover between the two distinctly different careers. Thank you.
Faye Fernandez, Christina Kashishian, and Juliet Underhill.
Good evening, members of the school board and Dr. Blackburn. My name is Faye Fernandez. I've been a resident of Melbourne for 3 years. My family moved to Melbourne when my husband was stationed at Patrick Air Force Base. It was a station that we requested and were extremely excited to get. We knew that the area would be great for our family. We have enjoyed the perfect weather, the beaches, the people in our community. We know many military families who have chosen to move and retire here. We had hoped to retire here ourselves. But after hearing of the law that passed to arm school personnel, we may have to change our plans. It seems crazy that one single law could cause us to move out of an area that we have grown to love. But it doesn't matter how much we love the weather, the beach, the people, or our jobs, if we cannot trust that our children will be safe in school. We have a 4-year-old who should be entering Sherwood Elementary next fall. We do not feel safe allowing our child to attend a school that will arm school staff who are not trained law enforcement. There is no data to show that arming staff will make a school more safe. And in fact, the numbers show that arming staff is likely to cause more accidents and harm to students. We will not wait until that accident happens. Our child will not attend any school that allows its staff to be armed. When my husband is deployed, he needs to know that his children are as safe as they can possibly be. He deserves that. I ask the school board and the superintendent to please opt out of the Guardian program and not arm any staff. Thank you.
Christina Kashishian, Juliet Underhill, and Paul Delory.
Mr. Susan, congratulations. I think you're the first person in my life that's ever pronounced my last name properly. The first time. So, oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Craig.
It's really not a big deal. It's a great name.
Sorry,
You
thank
gotta
you.
start that over. Are you ready?
Yes, I
All right.
am. All right, my first point, I had actually heard it, somebody had mentioned this on a show, and I thought, wow, that's actually quite interesting, and most people don't talk about that. But the spirit of the Second Amendment was to allow people to take up arms against the government. Well, teachers are government employees. And while the vast majority of teachers are incredible people, talented people, well-educated people, professionals that we trust our children with every day, and they're responsible for the Brevard County schools being as successful as they are, some of the teachers in this school system have abused their power in terrible ways. We've all heard about it. In May of 2017, a Brevard County teacher was arrested threatening other staff. In July of 2017, a Brevard County teacher was arrested for asking for pornographic photos of a student. In October of 2017, a Brevard County teacher was charged with having sex with a student. In October of 2017, a Brevard County teacher's aide was charged with lewd and lascivious battery on a student. In November, a Brevard County teacher's a Brevard County teacher was arrested and charged with lewd and lascivious molestation of a student. And in December of 2017, a Brevard County teacher was charged with battery on a student. That's not even going back a full year. I'm sure that BPS has a vetting process in place for the children that we put in your care. And I'm sure that you're confident that this vetting process is adequate to provide safety for those children. Well, it's not. How are we to trust that this marshal training and vetting process is going to be perfect? Because it needs to be perfect, or there will be dead children. How are we supposed to expect that this is going to be perfect when the current standards you trust aren't even adequate? Brevard County should not be the testing ground for this kind of program in Florida. We have some amazing teachers here in Brevard, like I've said, but we also have some problems. Let's let our dedicated law enforcement handle law enforcement. Somebody was also saying that, it's just like the air marshals on an airplane. I don't see the air marshals flying the plane, and I don't see the air marshals walking up and down the aisles taking care of people. Let's have dedicated staff for law enforcement, and let's let teachers be teachers.
Juliet Underhill, Paul Delory, and Tricia Okipa.
Good evening. My name is Juliet Underhill. I have two children that have graduated from Brevard County Public Schools, and I have stayed in Brevard County Public Schools as a volunteer. I volunteer at Cocoa Beach Junior Senior in the guidance department, so I get the pleasure of seeing kids at their best when they're getting their college acceptances or scholarships, but in the guidance department, you also see kids at their worst, acting out fights, meltdowns, and adding an element of lethal fear into that kind of situation, that kind of high-stakes, tense, emotional situation would absolutely be a huge barrier to creating trust with students, to be able to decompress and calm these students down and be able to move forward and de-escalate. I also have another question or concern. We do have a sheriff's deputy, SRO, on campus, and our SRO wears a Kevlar vest like the deputy has in the corner there. And will these educators with guns also receive Kevlar vests? And if they get them, why not have students and employees and the lunch ladies in Kevlar vests? And it might sound ridiculous for me to get up and say that every student and staff member on campus should have a Kevlar vest, but I don't feel it's any less ridiculous than the idea of having guns on campus. We don't ask our SRO to teach calculus or the French Revolution or chemistry, to make lesson plans or comply with the state and federal mandated paperwork. And so I think asking educators to do their job and our SRO, he's a wonderful guy, to do his job, I just don't think you can combine them together at all. The last thing I would like to leave you with is just the plea to please listen to us. We know that the NRA money can buy silence and compliance from our lawmakers, but we're asking you to listen to us, not the NRA. Represent us, not the gun lobby, and protect the kids, not the gun lobby. Thank you so much for your time.
Paul Delory, Tricia Okipa, and Summer Adams.
Good evening, school board members, Dr. Blackburn. My name is Paul Delory, and I'm an educator at Palm Bay Magnet High School. I'd like to speak to you tonight about the school safety issue, which has been in the news recently and certainly presented here tonight. Much has been debated about different gun control measures and possibly arming teachers as a defense against potential shooters. I am not going to go into my feelings about these issues. Rather, I would like to propose an idea based on my simple analysis of these terrible events. Recently, you have approved and instituted new positive security measures to try and protect our schools. Thank you. However, unless we institute prison-like control measures such as fences topped with razor wire, metal detectors at every entrance, physical inspection of all persons and bags brought into the school, we are never going to be 100% safe. So at some point, if someone is truly intent on getting guns into school and doing harm, they will find a way. With that in mind, I would like you to think about these questions. When are the police called to respond to an active shooter? When is the school put into lockdown? When is the school resource officer directed to intercept and engage an active shooter? The answer to these questions is simple, and that is after the shooting has started. That means that no matter how fast the response times are, even with armed teachers in the building, there are still going to be casualties. My proposal is to train volunteer teachers and staff to treat traumatic injuries and to provide them with the equipment to treat those wounds. The minutes saved to start life-saving treatment can be critical. As we heard with the Pulse nightclub shooting in Orlando, if medical personnel had been able to get into the nightclub sooner, more victims may have survived. Only after the shooter has been dealt with or even moved off to another section of the campus, medical treatment can begin. This may increase the chances of survival for some victims. If you need a simple example of this idea, look to the military. Each member of a fighting unit has a weapon to engage the enemy, but every combat unit also has a medic who is taught to train and to take care and treat these casualties. All I'm saying here is that we need to put medics in the buildings to treat the wounded. Recently, Governor Scott signed a gun control bill. As part of that bill, funds are earmarked for school districts to use to train teachers to use weapons. Although this is at the discretion of individual districts, the money is there. I would call upon this school board in this county to take a leadership position and request that some of those funds be used to train volunteers to treat these wounds and to equip these teachers with the tools necessary to save lives. I would also propose that the county utilize resources directly and already at its disposal to begin this process. We can call upon the paramedics currently working in the Brevard County Fire and Rescue Department to provide the training.
Thank you, Mr. Delory. Your time is up. I appreciate it.
Just one quick thing. I would rather not have a gun. I would rather save a life than take a life. Thank you.
Tricia Okipa, Summer Adams, and Sarah Conklin.
Good evening. I'm Tricia Ochipa.
Oh, sorry, it's so close.
That's fine. I'm the daughter of a retired teacher who taught her entire career in Brevard County. I was born in Melbourne. I grew up here. I attended Brevard County schools my entire school career. And even though I did stretch my wings after college to see what else the world had to offer,
time for me to have children. I had to come home because I couldn't see myself having them educated or being raised anywhere else. I am the mother of 4 boys. 3 are school aged. My oldest is a freshman in high school, and my youngest is on his way to preschool next fall. I'm an active volunteer and consider myself to be very invested in their academic lives. And I'm so upset that I have this decision looming. And that's the decision that if we do have increased guns on school campuses, if we arm school personnel, then I will pull my children out of school. I feel that Brevard County has some of the best schools, but I will still pull them. I never wanted to homeschool my kids, and frankly, I don't even know if I'm up to the task, but I'll still pull them. I worry that they will not reach their full potential and that my gifted kids will miss the resources that they're currently getting, but I'll pull them. I hate that they'll miss out on great sports and clubs that they're all very active in, that they will miss the diverse social culture that offers life lessons beyond textbooks, but I'll pull them. It breaks my heart that my little one might never know the true learning experience of a classroom community, of recess, of a noisy cafeteria at lunchtime, of falling in love with their primary teacher, but I'll pull them. Field trips, science fairs, back to school night, picture day yearbooks, Friday night games, class parties, award ceremonies, and field day will no longer be part of our lives, but I'll pull them. To think that someday I might look back and regret my decision causes a lot of anxiety, but I would rather second guess my decision about giving them every academic opportunity than to have to one day wish I had done something to grant them their most important opportunity, and that's the chance to live, to grow up and be safe. I know we can't protect our children from every danger in the world, but I refuse to expose them to the dangers I can't protect them from. And more guns on campus is a danger I can't abide by. The FBI has found that armed civilians, by and large, do not stop active shooters. Let's use our resources to enhance school security and other measures. Please do not allow our school personnel to carry weapons. Thank you for my time.
Summer Adams, Sarah Conkling, and Tracy Thompson.
Hello, I'm Summer Adams. Thank you for your time tonight. I stand before you tonight in 3 separate roles. I stand before you as a trained epidemiologist, and in that role, I'm tempted to state several different statistics explaining why this guardianship program is, in fact, a horrible idea. Why the rates of increased homicides, suicides, accidental discharges, interpersonal conflicts in the workplace resulting in fatal shootings, why kids and guns don't mix, lost guns and Sky Marshal programs, et cetera, why all of these statistics, why we can't say that they would be any different in schools than they would be in any other workplace environment or the home, or why, in fact, they might, in fact, be higher in schools when the ratio of children is so much higher than adults. I'm tempted to also say and explain that the fact that mass shootings nearly all occur in gun-free zones does not equate to the fact that mass shootings could be prevented if we put guns in school zones. Perpetuators of these crimes go into the mass shootings knowing that they are more than likely to be shot, face life imprisonment, or even the death penalty. They're not stopping at the door looking for the sign saying that there are armed personnel inside. There is no evidence whatsoever that arming school personnel will help. As a Brevard County resident, I am very concerned that we would move forward with this measure with very little evidence of efficacy and extraordinary evidence of risk and liability. And as a mother of 2 sons in the Brevard County school system, I am extremely scared that we would put our children in an essential security science experiment. We have no way of knowing if this will work, and we have a great deal of evidence showing that it could be a catastrophe on many levels. The only way we will ever know if this will work is either when an accident happens or a mass shooting occurs. There's a reason why the rest of the country has not yet gone this route, and many other counties in Florida are opting out of this proposal. I implore you not to allow school personnel and students in Brevard County become a guinea pig in this school marshal program. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Adams.
Sarah Conkling, Tracy Thompson, and Sarah Evans.
Good evening. I want to thank all of you for being here tonight and for listening to all of us. I know that you've been sitting here a long time, so I'm greatly appreciative of that. My name's Sarah Ann Conkling. I think there's 2 other people in the room who have said this tonight, but I'll be number 3. I'm entirely a product of Brevard County Public Schools. I went to Riverview and Apollo Elementary, Parkway Junior High, and Titusville High School, and in fact, our family has had 3 generations graduate from Titusville High School. The first was my father in 1929. So I've been a teacher at 3 different colleges, but my first teaching was at Titusville High School, where I tutored refugees who had fled Cuba in English language in the evening, and where I was also a student aide in a couple of different classrooms during the day. And as an adult, I have volunteered in two of our schools here in the Brevard County school system. I'm happy about that too. I've come to speak this evening about the same specific proposal that has been offered in good faith with a sincere intention to make our schools safer. I feel strongly in this discussion that we should acknowledge the good intentions of all those speaking to this topic, and especially we should acknowledge the good intentions of those with whom we disagree. And as one of many people who has become a lot more politically active in the wake of our 2016 election, I feel strongly that we gain nothing by demonizing each other for sincerely held beliefs. That all said, I feel I must speak wholeheartedly against any effort to arm anyone other than trained, active law enforcement members at our schools. As we have seen in the recent Parkland shooting, even a well-trained, active school resource officer who loved the children in that school was capable, in a moment of extreme chaos, of making a mistaken judgment that contributed to the tragedy. Arming those who are not active law enforcement personnel adds risk to any active shooter situation that those armed will fire inappropriately or fire inaccurately. It also adds risk that the additional guns on campus could fall into the wrong hands. And then there's also a risk that the citizen marshal might not fire at all at an active shooter, which is what happened with the school resource officer at Parkland. Last but not least, there is absolutely no research data that shows that arming people who are not active law enforcement members and putting them in schools does anything at all to reduce gun violence in schools. If and when that data were to exist, I would support revisiting this issue. As responsible board members, educators, and citizens, we should not implement anything that could add the risk of accidental death to our students without a sheaf of research to support the decision. I know you all have a difficult task ahead of you in deciding whether to add guns to our schools. It might help in that decision to ask yourselves, would I be okay if a citizen marshal shot and killed my own child by an inaccurate bullet in an effort to kill an active shooter? Would it be okay if a citizen marshal made a mistake of identification in the chaos of an active shooter situation and
Thank you,
shot
Ms. Conklin.
shot and killed my child by mistake? Thank you. These children are all ours. Let's take care of them. Thank you.
Thank you. Tracy Thompson, Sarah Evans, Lori Lahuru. Sorry. I'll figure it out.
Good evening, and thank you for sticking around. And I want to thank everybody out there
As a parent, I'm very concerned about this subject that we've been talking about this evening. And I just want to thank everybody for their input. And basically, I'm saying ditto, 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 ditto. I really loved hearing from a veteran who understands the reality of what we're talking about. I don't think Jason Bourne exists in any of the staff at any of our schools. And I think there might be some Jason Bourne wannabes, but I don't really feel like they can protect my children. Also, on a personal note, I have 2 sons with autism and cognitive disabilities. They can't navigate a drill for this type of situation. I doubt very seriously they would be able to handle law enforcement coming in at a time that was volatile and really understanding what they're supposed to do. So I'm imagining my 2 beautiful boys, some of the most innocent children that you could ever meet, having to come face to face with teachers and staff that they see every day with a gun and not being able to understand what they're supposed to do. And that's the reality that I have to face when we're having these discussions. I want to also suggest something that's on a positive note. I've actually seen parents from Sandy Hook who started Sandy Hook Promise. And a suggestion I have for you, it's free. They come to districts to try to teach how to not let this happen. It's free. Call them, have them come to the district, see what they have to offer. And please, please protect my children by not allowing staff to carry guns. I feel much more comfortable with resource officers like we have here. But if I thought that there was people in this room with concealed weapons, that would not make me feel safe. Please help my children, please help all of us, and do the right thing. Thank you for your time tonight.
Sarah Evans, Lori LaRoe, and Pam Dershka.
Thank you, guys. My name is Sarah Evans. I won't take up much of your time because you've heard a lot of the talking points over and over, but I do want to say this. Oh, sorry. We moved here, it's been a year, exactly, just about, from St. Louis. St. Louis consistently voted the most violent city in the U.S. I don't have to tell you the other things that go on there. I will say, though, they don't have any guns in their schools. Their security does not carry guns. They have a school resource officer, and even he's not armed. They don't have a problem with weapons discharging in the school. They have had, in the past, several years ago, students sneak a gun in, but it was quickly noted on the cameras and attended to. So I was rather shocked when we moved here, and there's just a very blasé attitude about guns. I see people with open carry, and I have to say, I'm more nervous here than I was in St. Louis. That shocks me. We love living here. We love our school. Our daughter is 5, she goes to Ocean Breeze. But I have to say, I do not understand Florida and its guns. And I just wanted to give you an idea of what happens in a violent city. And hopefully you will take that with you when you make a decision. Thank you, guys.
Lori LaRoe, Pam Dershka, and Rebecca Reese. I hope I got it right. Was it close?
Thank you to the board and superintendent. My name is Lori LaRue. I'm a parent of a student in a Brevard Public School. I'd like to do some quick math with you tonight. Everything here is a big ditto for me also. We currently have 14 school shootings school shooting deaths per year. That's on average. For every 6,000 people with a gun, we get 1 gun death per year from homicide, suicide, and even from accidents. Honest, good people having a temporary lapse in judgment. If only 10% of teachers carry guns into schools, that will equal 300,000 guns added to US school campuses. Divide that by the 6,000, and we get the average number of school shooting deaths that we can expect, 50 per year from now on. We would go from 14 per year on average to 50. If we allow guns on school campuses, history will not look back kindly on our generation. Our actions will be seen as pouring gasoline on a fire that will lead to the increased destruction of so many more young lives than if we had simply tried to keep weapons away from our children. We have an opportunity now to listen to the science. The numbers don't lie. More guns equals more gun deaths. This is proven in homes, schools, cities, states, and entire countries. I have always been proud of our public school system. And I was shocked when I saw the press conference with Sheriff Ivey. I was shocked by the power that he apparently has over our school board. And I would like to be able to look forward to the future and know that you all are making the right decision for the safety of our children. Let's protect our schools from gun violence the same way we protect our courts and houses of Congress. No one goes in with a gun, period. Thank you.
Pam Dershka, Rebecca Reese, and Karen Gonzalez.
Hello. Good job on that name, too. That's a difficult one to get sometimes. My name is Pam Dershka. I live in Titusville. I'm speaking as an aunt of a student at the Titusville High School, as a Florida resident of close to 40 years, where many of those years I was a volunteer in the public school, an elected member of the school advisory council, and a former teacher and coach. I recently attended a panel discussion on gun violence where the Orange County Sheriff, Orange County School Board members, representative from the congressman, and a representative from Moms Demand Action all unanimously took a position against the Guardian program. In fact, the school board members said all 8 members on their board in Orange County voted against implementing the program. Sheriff Sherry Demings said it would take nearly 10 times the hours of training proposed to be truly proficient, along with regular time on the range. We all agree we want to keep our students safe. The bill passed by the Florida legislature is a shocking solution when they had the opportunity to do much more. I have yet to meet a teacher who thinks the Guardian program is a good idea, nor have I met a parent who wants the teacher of their child to be stowing a gun in their classroom. We all agree that teachers have an immense responsibility, which grows larger each year as they continue to take on societal issues. I would also hope we all agree they are not paid appropriately for their skills and responsibility. The idea that a teacher, a coach, or janitor could keep a gun safely stowed away, and yet in a short time, when a tragedy occurs, be able to use it to protect their students is ludicrous. If that doesn't convince you, consider the liability the school district has when there are guns in the schools. While you look at solutions for safer schools, I strongly request you refuse to implement the provisions of the Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School Public Safety Act that would arm school personnel, and I request that the issue be on the next agenda of the school board meeting. Thank you.
Rebecca Reese, Karen Gonzalez, and Catherine Work.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for staying so late this evening. I really appreciate your time. I am a mom of 2 children who are currently in the Brevard Public School system. Before I was a mom, I was a teacher myself. I have taught in multiple countries throughout the world, and I have enjoyed my experience immensely. I have never been fearful in my position as a teacher, never. Now that I reside in the United States, I am reluctant to ever return to my teaching position, primarily because of what I believe is the USA's lax gun laws, which have resulted in multiple mass shootings in high schools and college campuses. I don't want my name on that list, the list that seems to shake us to the core temporarily. I have 2 daughters that currently are in grade 1 and grade 3. I want to be there for them. I want to see them grow old. I want to share in their joys and their heartbreaks. I don't want their names on that list, the list that shakes us to the core, at least for a few weeks. Columbine, 1999, 12 people lost their lives. Virginia Tech, 2007, 32 people lost their lives. Sandy Hook, 20 first graders, the grade that my child is currently in. 20 first graders and 6 faculty staff lost their lives. Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, 14 students and 3 staff members shot. I wonder if the family and the friends of those children that made the list, I wonder how they feel about this conversation we are having tonight. I'm pretty sure they feel we have failed them greatly. I grew up in Ireland. The first 20 years of my life, I was there and I lived through what we call now the Troubles. There were bombs and killings on a regular basis. It was part of life growing up in Ireland. My family and my friends in the United States would balk and shake their heads at the craziness going on, and it was crazy. But when you hear kneecapping bombs, explosions every single night on the news, you become numb to that. I'm saying this to you now because I feel that America has become numb to the tragedies that the guns are causing over here. Another shooting in Orlando, another mass shooting on a school campus, another hate shooting on a nightclub, another list of names we are temporarily mourning and then forgetting. It's life in America, and the world is looking at us right now and shaking their heads wondering why we are not doing more about it. Why is America not changing? Why is Florida not changing? Why is Brevard County not changing? There is no easy fix to this nationwide problem. We have massive issues with our healthcare that need to be addressed and implemented. Anti-bullying policies need to be applied to schools and not just written up in a handbook. Red flags are there for a reason. We need to stop ignoring them and apologizing for the fact the NRA and the big corporations need to stay out of politics to minimize corruption and buy out its politicians. Gun laws need to change. BPS, we hand our children over to you and I want them back safe and sound at the end of the day. Please do not allow guns onto the campus. Do something safe for my children, please.
Karen Gonzalez and Catherine Work.
I'm here to speak on protecting our children and keeping guns out of the school. I'm here to ask that the school board stop turning their head to early signs and to repeated signs of danger. I can speak of this on a very personal level. I'm a mom of 2 children. I'm going to keep their genders quiet because of this experience I'm going to share with you. I have a child in elementary and I have a child in middle who's about to go to high school. My child in elementary right now was threatened in first grade to be shot and killed by another student. I took immediate measures and went to the principal. It was kind of turned the cheek and we just had them separated in line. That's the way that situation was handled. 3 years later, my child was threatened again by the very same student who told my child, "Do you remember what I threatened to do to you in first grade?" The child repeated the act to my child and said, "I'm sorry I didn't do it. This time I will." My child was in the cafeteria line, surrounded by friends. My child exited the line and gathered the peers and went directly to the office. The steps I had to take to implement and protect my child after that are disgraceful. The fact that I was told that The reason it's not taken to a higher level is because that student didn't have the weapon is disgraceful. The fact that the school board turns their heads to red signs and flags is disgraceful. The fact that you're waiting for the weapon to come in is disgraceful. How many times do you have to say, I'm sorry? I told my principal, I'm a very loud speaker and advocate of my children. I've worked in the mental health field for 20 years in the Department of Justice and Criminal Justice. I've worked in and out of prison settings. I've worked here in Brevard County where children are removed. I'm so tired of our children being failed because the system turns their cheek. My child won't be that statistic. I am asking you to take a stand and keep guns out. When you have a child who is mentally struggling with a mental illness, who is angry, who is abandoned, who has anger issues and diagnosis, 1, 2, or 3 personnel is not going to stop that child. Just like the child who threatened mine is still on campus with my child is disgusting and unacceptable. I'm asking you to keep guns out. I'm asking you to stop turning your head. I'm asking you to make it personal for you as it is personal for us.
Catherine Work. Catherine?
Hello, thank you. My name is Catherine Warwick, and I wanted to speak about the STOMP program today. Our country has faced a lot of heartache and terror with the many school shootings over the last decade. I was in middle school living in Colorado when Columbine happened and was extremely upset and shocked by it. Because of this, I know we are all looking for answers to stop the potential shootings for our schools. I'm very pleased with Brevard's interest in acting to keep our children safe. What I'm worried about is that arming our teachers will, even willing and trained teachers, will take us into a dangerous territory. Being a teacher is hard and takes much patience because students can be very challenging. I worry about the evidence suggesting that weapons owners can experience a change in attitude similar to the psychology experiment gone wrong, where study subjects were divided into inmate and officer. A lot of people were hurt in that study. I worry this move has the potential to hurt our students rather than deter a shooter, especially seeing as though many shooters in the past have been suicidal and are not deterred by death. The move to allow teachers to carry guns is a very serious one. To me, the STOMP proposal sounds like we're arming a war zone rather than disarming one. I remember the quote from the movie Volcano. Do you guys remember that movie? It was kind of a funny one. It just popped in my head when thinking of all this stuff. If you put a frog into boiling water, it'll jump out. Ouch, it's too hot in there, right? But if you put a frog into lukewarm water, you might end up with a cooked frog. So I wonder if people coming from the outside, coming now, would think that we got hot water, you know? So I would beg us to take a look at the temperature of our water and evaluate whether this initiative is going to increase the temperature of our water or make it less hot. I feel strongly that this is not our battle, rather one for gun legislature. I feel strongly that bringing more weapons to a fight leaves more people hurt, and urge us to consider if guns in schools would make it more dangerous. I feel it is critical to train students and teachers on what to do in an active shooter. I think that's awesome. I think it is critical to have a single point of entry with metal detectors in the schools. I think that's awesome. I think it's critical to have SROs on campus. I think that's awesome. What I'm worried about is arming teachers. Please let us not accept the buck, but pass it back to the people who need to deal with it, the legislatures.
Thank you. But I didn't call the next three up because we've gone for just over an hour and 10, and I want to make sure that do we have any requests for a break? We've got 14 more speakers, so another 50 minutes or so. All good? Okay. Then we'll go with Kara Matthews, Catherine Martinez, and Kelly Damerow.
Hi guys, Kara Matthews. On my way here tonight, I thought to myself, it would be really nice if I didn't have to come here and yell at you guys all the time. So just like a parent-teacher conference, always start with the positive. So great job on your STEM initiatives. I got to go to the unveiling of the Pirates to Panthers program last week at Palm Bay High School. Fantastic. So now for your reprimand. I've stood here before you as a teacher, as a member of this community, and tonight I'm here as a mother. And we all know that the force of mothers is the most powerful force on the planet. When tragedy strikes and hits our babies, we want to react, we want to fix it immediately. As elected officials, you want to appease your constituents. But decisions like these have to be data-based. When I taught science, I all year would drill into my students, does science care about your feelings? No, Miss Matthews. Does science care about your emotions? No, Miss Matthews. What does it care about? It cares about data, because I wanted them to grow into young adults and adults who made data-based decisions, not decisions based on memes on Facebook. One of my former students has already spoken tonight. Another one is going to speak in a little while. So proud. Another thing I learned that I shared with my students was from Bill Nye, the Science Guy. And decisions like these, he would say, always follow the money. Who stands to profit from this gun program? It sure as sugar is not Brevard County Public Schools. We are going to lose financially, educationally, and everything else in between. Our community and more importantly, our kids will lose. There is so much data to support arming teachers is a bad idea. So I hope that all of you have had really great science teachers who taught you how to make data-based decisions, not emotional ones. Thank you so much for your time, guys.
Catherine Martinez, Kelly Damerow, and Cole Manis.
Hi, my name is Catherine Martinez. I'm speaking as a private citizen. I live in Melbourne. And I've never spoke at a school board meeting before. I never, really felt strongly, but now I've got this little one to think about. And I moved to Melbourne about 7 years ago, and let me just, go to my notes. As a product of public schools myself, I completed higher education and earned a doctorate in behavior analysis without spending a cent of my own money on tuition. So I believe in the potential of the public school system. However, it's disheartening when we don't pay our teachers an adequate wage or provide them with the necessary supplies. And now we're talking about arming them. This is not their job, and there's no evidence that will increase the safety of our children. Now, for the first time ever, I'm considering homeschooling because I do not want my child in a school with guns on campus. There is zero research which shows that arming teachers or putting more armed security in schools will make them safer. This is because it likely won't. Most people, even those highly trained, would not be able to stop an active shooter and would instead just put themselves in harm's way. Even law enforcement officers suffer casualties about 50% of the time when they engage active shooters. The solution is not more guns. Americans make up less than 5% of the world's population, yet own about 42% of the guns. We have far more guns, thus we have significantly more gun deaths than any other developed nation. This is not a correlation. This is cause and effect. The cause is guns. The effect is gun deaths. The research shows that restrictions on guns leads to a decrease in gun violence. Less guns, not more. Now, I grew up hunting for food and was trained in gun safety since I was a small child. I'm not saying we should take away guns, but I don't think there's any need for private citizens to own automatic weapons, and background checks should be extremely stringent. We have to close the loopholes through private sales, and we must come up with a better solution to keep our children safe, because arming teachers is not the answer. Guns are the problem, not the solution. I beg the school board to reject the proposal to arm Brevard County teachers. Thank you.
Kelly Damerow, Cole Manis, and Eric Lehman.
Good evening. My name is Kelly Damerow. I'm a mother and educator turned attorney. We are all working towards the same goal, make schools safe. As a parent, I understand the feeling of wanting to do anything to protect your child. The unpredictable nature of school shootings makes us feel powerless and scared. But decisions made out of fear, unsupported by facts, are rarely the right decisions in the long run. So let's talk about what we know. We know 88% of the students that commit these heinous acts feel bullied, threatened, or rejected by students and teachers. If we devote resources to shutting down bullying, discrimination, and harassment, there's a chance to de-escalate conflict before it starts. We know that 20 to 30% of students above the elementary level consistently report seeing a weapon of some kind at school at least once during the year. If these students have a strong relationship with an adult, they are more likely to report it. We know proposals to arm school personnel are not supported by those directly impacted. The teachers' unions do not support this measure. A 2015 study of law enforcement leadership and public school principals found that neither group supports arming teachers or school administrators, but they do support more school resource officers. School resource officers are an essential element of a threat assessment team. This team consists of the principal, school counselor, school psychologist, and a school-based police officer. These are members of the school community. They know the teachers, they know the parents, and they know the students. When an incident occurs, they talk to the people involved and any witnesses. They try to figure out if the threat is serious. The next steps can include notifying parents, taking steps to protect victims, and referrals to mental health and law enforcement if that's an appropriate way to go. There's a lot we don't know when it comes to the proposal to arm school personnel. What happens when an accident occurs? One terrible accident, one serious lawsuit could bankrupt this school system. What will this cost the taxpayers? Especially if the school district is no longer insurable. When Kansas voted to allow school districts to allow teachers to be armed, over 85% of the school districts would have lost their insurance if they moved forward with the measure. These are dangerous questions to leave unanswered. So let's go with what we know. The experts and the research shows schools are made safer by improving the school climate. That is the quality of relationships among the students and the adults in a school. This is a long-term solution, not a quick fix. But if our goal is truly safer schools, this is how we get there. Thank you.
Cole Manis, Eric Lehman, and Victoria Reyes.
Good evening, Dr. Blackburn and the board. Thanks for having us. I think with this situation, I think people on both sides of it, their heart's in the right place. It's just a matter of getting us there. Some of the things, I'm a teacher at Heritage High School. I'm also a basketball coach there. So that, to give you some context into what's going through my head, some of the things that I saw, I just want to bring it up to you again and tell you some of the questions that came to me as a teacher and coach. One of the things coming through is legislative leaders struck a compromise that would keep guns away from teachers, but keep guns in schools by arming school personnel such as librarians, counselors, and coaches. As a coach, we are full-time teachers, so I don't know how we would approach that. Would coaches get more planning periods so that way they're not teaching full-time? As a coach, I'm a basketball coach. During practice, am I supposed to keep this gun on me? If so, that's going to change the way I would run practice considerably. Also during games, am I supposed to keep it on me during basketball games? If not, where would I keep it? Is there a place on campus where I'm supposed to lock that? Is there a place in my car I'm supposed to keep that? Where would the gun go? Under an amendment successfully proposed by State Senator Randolph Bracy, these employees would have to first undergo 12 hours of diversity training. This one's not getting talked about too much, and I don't understand why you need diversity training when it comes to putting guns in the schools. Why is diversity training necessary? Is it because there's a fear that because most of the teachers carrying will be white, there will be a perception of potential discrimination? And if that's a concern, is a 12-hour diversity course supposed to rewire a person? This initiative will utilize only those administrators and staff who volunteer to become that extra level of response. This is an egocentric perspective. Just because the individual carrying the gun feels comfortable does not mean that the teachers and students will feel comfortable with it. It affects the learning environment. This is coming from Sheriff Ivey. I personally believe that in order to do everything possible to protect our children, we have to give those that are already there when the fight starts a chance to actively engage, if they choose, with the tools necessary to possibly change the outcome. So if a teacher volunteers for this, does this mean they must actively engage a gunman? Who will watch the teacher's 25 to 30 students while they actively engage? So if I'm actively engaging the gunman, are my 25 to 30 students supposed to go next door to the teacher? And if we don't know who has the guns, she's not going to be properly trained for this, and it's just going to be 30 more kids thrown on her. While actively engaging, what if the teacher accidentally shoots someone else? Who is liable? Is the teacher liable for that, or is the school district liable? If the teacher stays in the room, does not actively engage, will they be liable for student deaths? Another quote from Sheriff Ivey is, "There is no doubt this concept will have its doubters, but such criticism will not deter me, even if the doubters are the vast majority of the employees, as we see here this evening." If our county does in fact get to choose if we participate in this program, let's choose to actually protect our students instead.
Eric Lehman, Victoria Reyes, and Shelley Martins.
Thank you, Board, for your time tonight. We've heard a lot of statistics and anecdotes, and I'm sorry, I prepared my speech last night, I have more. January 18th of 2014, a firearm of an Ohio school resource officer was discharged while the officer was cleaning his weapon on school property. On November 14th, 2016, a school resource officer accidentally discharged his weapon. The bullet traveled through a wall and hit a teacher. And 2 months before that, 4 children at a Pennsylvania school found a loaded pistol resting on the toilet tank where their teacher had left it. And 8 days before the shooting at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, a 3rd grader at a Minnesota elementary school managed to pull the trigger of a weapon of a school resource officer in a department-approved level 3 security holster with a trigger guard, discharging the weapon that apparently had the safety disabled and had a round chambered. However, the armed uniformed deputy stationed at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, a 30-year veteran with military training, twice nominated for the Deputy of the Year, failed to intercede in the tragedy that unfolded before his eyes. Guns are not the solution to our problem with guns. A good guy with a gun is not the solution to a bad guy with a gun. The solution to a bad guy with a gun is to take the guns away and to provide mental health counseling. That is what will actually help us. The University of Virginia's Youth Violence Project has developed an 8-point approach to address school violence, endorsed by 115 distinct organizations, from the Journal of Applied School Psychology to the Child Health and Development Institute. Number 1, a national requirement for all schools to assess school climate and maintain physically and emotionally safe conditions and positive school environments that protect all students and adults from bullying, discrimination, harassment, and assault. Number 2, a ban on assault-style weapons, high-capacity ammunition clips, and products that modify semi-automatic firearms to enable them to function like automatic firearms. Number 3, adequate staffing, such as counselors, psychiatrists, psychologists, and social workers, of coordinated school and community-based mental health services for individuals with risk factors for violence, recognizing that violence is not intrinsically a product of mental illness. Number 4, reform of school discipline to reduce expulsionary practices and foster positive social, behavioral, emotional, and academic success for students. 5, universal background checks to screen out violent offenders, persons who have been hospitalized for violence towards themselves or others, and persons on no-fly and terror list watch lists. Number 6, a national program to train and maintain school community-based threat assessment teams that include mental health and law enforcement partners. Threat assessment programs should include practical channels of communications for persons to report potential threats, as well as the interventions to resolve conflicts and assist troubled individuals. 7, removal of legal barriers to sharing safety-related information among educational, mental health, and law enforcement agencies. And number 8, establishing gun violence protection orders that allow courts to issue time-limited restraining orders requiring firearms to be recovered by law enforcement when there is evidence of an individual is planning to carry out acts against others or themselves.
Thank you, Mr. Lehman.
Guns make our
Appreciate
children
it.
less safe. Take these actions where you can and implement them and advocate them where you cannot.
Thank you, sir.
Victoria Reyes, Shelley Martins, and Kristen Cornejo.
Before I start, I just want to acknowledge everyone for being here. This is what democracy looks like. My name is Victoria Reyes, and I am a first grade teacher at Indian River County Schools. Meeting the love of my life led me to Viera, which prompted me to begin the work of finding my new school home here in Brevard County. I have to say you have some of the finest schools I've seen and I've lived in Miami-Dade, DC, and New York City. You all have thingamajoggers and outperforming schools and overflowing PTOs and community support. But I've got to say, taking a deeper look at your county, I'm worried. Your teachers are severely underpaid as compared to other surrounding districts. My highly effective rating in your district after taxes amounts to groceries for about 3 months. and now you're seriously considering arming staff at your schools. I'm worried. There are so many factors that cause a child to feel anxiety at school. Did I bring a pencil? Did mommy put my field trip form in my folder? What behavior color will I go home with today? Can I go to the bathroom right now, or do I have to hold it? From the perspective of a child, school can be overwhelming. Imagine the anxiety levels knowing that my teacher has a gun. We want to believe that all teachers are good. I want to believe that all teachers are good, that every person that signs up to do the hard, mighty, rewarding work of educating children is good. But I also want to believe that all police officers are good, and yet, Black boys are being hunted every day in America. As educators, we yield tremendous power over our students. We decide when they can sit, when they can drink water, how they learn, how they speak, how they share ideas. Adding a weapon to the balance beam of power in our classrooms has the potential to be disastrous. Don't arm us with guns. Arm us with a school counselor. Arm us with single-point entry schools. Arm us with walkie-talkies. Arm us with community supports. Arm us with crisis training. Arm us with a public statement against guns in schools. Arm us with all these things, but please, please do not arm us with guns. Thank you.
Shelley Mertens, Kristen Cornejo, and Jennifer Carroll. Shelley is not here, thank you. Kristen Cornejo? Saw you.
Hi, I know it's late, so I won't take a lot of time. I had written up a bunch of stuff that everybody just already said, so I'm just gonna echo that and just say ditto like some of the others. And I also want to echo what one other person said, which is that if I believe there is a gun in the classroom with my child will not be able to attend school here. I will take them out and homeschool. I know there are other parents who feel this way, and I hope that you'll take that into consideration. It's not safe. It's not right. We need to go to the federal level and get things changed across the board. Trying to make these little changes by adding gasoline to the fire, it's not gonna do it. Thank you.
Jennifer Carroll, Gia Carroll, and yes, and Kalis Narendran. Sorry. Please.
I come here as a mother. I have a son at Mel, I have a daughter at Central, and I have one that's upcoming. Superintendent Blackburn, I was not a math major in college. I studied English Lit, but by my rough calculations, 100% of the people in this room are against this proposal. Now, that's just rough math, you know, I didn't major in it, but I'm just guesstimating. Show of hands, anyone for? Anyone at all? Okay, so that would be a 0% for 100% against. So please take that into consideration. Now, a lot of what I had planned to say has already been said by all of my friends out here who were on the 100% against side. But I do have a few things to add. According to Everytown for gun safety, on average, 96 people are killed with guns every single day in this country. For every one person killed with a gun, 2 more are injured. 7 children and teens are killed with guns in the US on an average day, and that number does not include those who are killed intentionally by people who have actively brought a gun to commit murder. That's just the ones who were accidentally killed as bystanders. America's gun homicide rate is more than 25 times the average of other high-income countries. The United States accounts for 4.6% of the world's population, but 82% of the gun deaths worldwide. Stand your ground laws, super popular in Florida, and especially with good old Ivy, they encourage the use of deadly force outside the home. They're also associated with significantly higher justifiable homicide rates. After Georgia passed its stand your ground law, the number of homicides in the state increased by 83%. In Florida, it tripled, 300% increase. Super something to be proud of. This push towards allowing easy access to guns in a growing variety of public places has only resulted in a greater risk of gun violence. Guns don't make people safer. They increase the likelihood that more people will be killed by them. Putting guns in our schools will increase the odds that a student or staff member will be killed by those guns, either accidentally or intentionally. Rather than arming school staff members with guns and opening them and the school district up to litigation when an accident happens, arm them with supplies for their classrooms so they aren't spending their own money to teach our kids. Arm them with school psychologists to help identify and assist kids who are in need. Arm them with resources to teach kids coping strategies and to combat bullying. Arm them with less mandatory testing and more learning time. Arm them with a living wage so they don't have to work 2 jobs to survive. Arm them with art supplies and musical instruments so kids learn to appreciate the beauty that can be found in the arts. Arm them with field trips so learning is about seeing how education can be applied in the real world rather than just reading about the world in a book.
Thank you, Ms. Carroll. Your time's up. I appreciate it.
Arm them with respect for the profession and treat them like the superheroes they are.
Gia Carroll, Kailas Narendran, and Carly Hudson. Gia?
Hi, thank you for letting me speak to you today. My name is Gia, and I am currently a student at Central Middle School in 8th grade. Me and my friends have been talking on and on about how horrific it would be if one of our teachers lashed out on a student and shot them. We all remember Sandy Hook. Innocent kids were killed. I have a baby sister who I would not want to see killed by an angry person. Sorry. We do not want our teachers to become soldiers. We want them to support us and help us, because some of us have really hard lives and schools are a sanctuary. Instead of arming them with guns, help them get the resources to help us stay more stable and happy, so we won't want to come to school and be angry and somebody decide to kill you. Help the mentally ill stay stable. Help us all realize that it's not okay to kill. We do not want to be afraid to go into a school to learn. We want to know it is okay to be yourself without having the fear that somebody will hate you. Millions of people know about killing and that it's wrong, but we get angry. And it's okay to be angry, but it's not okay to kill. You put a gun into a teacher's hand and a student steps out of place, it would be so easy for them to start another school shooting. And we cannot allow that. Students are the future of our country. We want to be heard. We want to be noticed. And I feel that putting a gun into my teacher's hand, who could essentially have a mental illness we are not aware about, is not the way to do that. Give us the supplies to make school safer. At Central, we have gates that are locked through school so nobody can get in. We have keypads so we can get through to the school from the office. Give us the supplies to stay safe, not the guns to fight back. We will not win that fight. We need to take steps to ensure that we are safe without risking somebody else's life. Handguns cannot compare to a semi-automatic gun. We need to take steps to ensure that we will stay safe without taking training that does not compare to years of experience. We can have steps taken to keep us all safe without having a death essentially happen because we were not taking the steps to keep people safe in the right way. Keep us safe, not with guns. Thank you.
Kailas Narendran, Carly Hudson, and Christopher Slauson.
Thanks for your time. I'm a parent here in Brevard County with School Aid Kids. Actually, I'm here instead of celebrating them with my 4th grader who won 2nd place in the science fair that Ms. Deskovich mentioned earlier. that's how much I actually care about this issue. That's huge for me and my family, and this is that important. I'm an engineer and entrepreneur who grew up in public schools. I was actually one of the kids in FIRST Robotics longer time ago. I've started multiple companies that make wearable robots that will paralyze people and make life easier for parents. My skills and interest in critical thinking have served me well. I'm encouraged by the pride that Brevard and this board take in STEM education and logical, critical thinking. I am, however, embarrassed that our county is seriously considering arming school personnel. Like all parents, I'm concerned about the safety of my children as well as all of those in our community. I love science and experiments, but I don't want our children to be part of one. This is an experiment of public policy predicated on a hypothesis devoid of data and facts. Just remember that, please. Recent events have focused the attention of the world on Florida, and I'm actually happy that our legislature was able to act in a manner that bucked the norm that supported entrenched special interests and did represent the interests of our citizens. I'm also pleased that they provided local municipalities to make the decisions that about what matters to them and how to implement sections of the law that might be more contentious and were harder to do at a state level. If you follow debate in the State House, anyone, especially anyone here, can see that arming school staff is special interest, trying to shoehorn firearms into public schools and drives concerned parents from public to private and schools of choice schools. The notion that firearms in schools makes me and many others fear for the safety of our children. It's been said time and time again tonight, arming staff is not going to be a deterrent for a crazy person with a gun. Okay, and it's not going to make anyone safer for all the reasons that were cited earlier. Firearms in schools wielded by anyone other than trained professional first responders is irresponsible. As a board, you have the ability to decide how the real concerns of our community are reduced to practice. And remember, these concerns of our community, not those of national special interests and industry lobbying groups. I urge you as a board to demonstrate critical thinking skills that you extol by basing your decision based on facts and data. The line is very clear. You get to decide if your interests lie with the national special interests or us, the parents, children, and voters of the school system. Understand where the real risks lie and what constitutes a real and present danger to our community, not some national agenda and industry. Do not adopt the Guardian program and keep guns out of our schools. Thank you.
Carly Hudson, Christopher Slauson, and Devin Vaughn.
Hi, my name is Carly Hudson. I'm with Melbourne High School, and I'm just going to read you a poem that me and my friend Matthew wrote. A sanctuary for education it was once described, but learning math suddenly turned into learning to survive. We are told to tuck our heads and hide. When they told us we were safe, truly they lied. We duck in our halls and classrooms as bullets buzz by. We hear the footsteps as our throats become dry. We did not sign up for this. We never wanted to fight. But since when did our friends and our teachers turn to knights? How many never agains will it take until our voice starts to bite? How many more angels will we lose to this awful blight? Today we are here to say never again, one final time. We the students are so young and in our prime. We will be the end to this hateful plague because this problem is not vague. With many groups lobbying the NRA one to name, there are no shortage of people to blame and to shame. With many politicians holding their ground, all we can do is use voice and make Scott, Trump, Ivey, and Rubio come round. Since when are common machines, those used only to kill, the very thought of it making so many ill? It is time to rise up. No longer shall our schools need to call for backup. Thank you.
Christopher Slauson and Devin Van.
Good evening, Dr. Blackburn, members of the board. My name is Major Chris Slauson. I've been a resident in Melbourne for nearly 3 years. My wife, who you heard from earlier tonight, and I have a 4-year-old son and a child on the way. I'm a 14-year pilot in the Air Force stationed here at Patrick. I speak today only as a private citizen and not on behalf of the Air Force or of the Department of Defense. As a pilot, I receive annual 9mm training, which is for more firearm training than most receive in the Air Force. Aside from security forces and certain elite groups, personnel typically only receive firearms instruction during basic training and in preparation for deployment. I also own a personal firearm. You've already heard much of what I'm about to say, but I feel it's important that you hear it from me. I'll start by dispelling the myth, if it exists, that all military personnel are in favor of arming school employees. I, for one, am not. The recent gun law passed by the Florida legislature does include some common sense provisions, raising the minimum purchase age to 21, implementing a 3-day wait, banning bump stocks, funding school security, and expanding mental health care. There are others that didn't make the cut, banning assault weapons and high-capacity magazines, strengthening background checks, or requiring owner licensing and gun registration. Unfortunately, in the final provision that did pass, they decided to go for the nuclear option, authorizing guns in schools. The legislation fails to provide evidence to suggest that increasing the number of guns in schools will make them safer, nor specify who is responsible when my child gets shot because of insufficient training, a weapon malfunction, or collateral damage. The legislation also fails to justify how 132 hours of training is sufficient to quickly and effectively take down a child with a gun. I've flown 120 combat missions and have been provided no such training. Experienced law enforcement may get such training, but I want to meet the person who thinks that they're ready for that responsibility with only 132 hours of training. In fact, I also want to meet the trainer, the superintendent, and the principal confident enough to sign off and accept that training. Our 4-year-old currently attends the Patrick Child Development Center and will attend Freedom 7 next year. I know that my wife and I are not the only two parents who would demand from their principals to know whether any school employee had been armed in accordance with the school marshal plan, and upon hearing so, immediately remove their child from that school. Fortunately, the legislation allows school districts the ability to opt out. You've already heard tonight that the Tampa Bay Times reports that Broward, Duval, Hillsborough, Miami-Dade, Seminole, Pasco, Pinellas, and St. Lucie have either opted out or intend to, and of the 12 largest counties in Florida, Brevard is the only one seriously considering implementing the school marshal program. The Brevard County Sheriff has already announced his intent to establish the program, leaving this board with the sole power to stop it. I urge you and the superintendent to opt out of this program. Thank you.
Devin Van.
My name is Devin Van. I'm a mom to a 7th, 4th, and 1st grader in Brevard Public Schools. I'm a PTO vice president and a room mom. I'm definitely not a public speaker. And as a side note, encourage students present to take public speaking, although lots of you have done a great job. Entrusting school personnel to carry a deadly weapon and employ lethal means should be a thoughtful process that is based on facts and evidence, not emotion, that identify what is in the best interest of student safety. Even with extensive training and experience, law enforcement officers struggle with tamping down physiological fight, flight, or freeze reactions in actual active assailant situations. The constricting of blood vessels, the flow of adrenaline, the tunneling of vision to focus on the assailant's weapon all impact judgment, accuracy, and decision-making. The Parkland School Resource Officer is a timely example, as are the 2 NYPD officers with more than 15 years in the force each that fired 16 rounds at an armed man outside the Empire State Building in 2013 and injured 9 bystanders. A 2008 RAND study found that officers involved in gunfights typically hit their intended targets only 18% of the time, and 30% of the time when the suspect is not returning fire. In a 2012 peer-reviewed study, researchers compared accuracy and decision-making of elite, experienced law enforcement officers with extensive experience with violent encounters versus rookie officers who had only recently completed academy training. They found that experienced officers had 75% accuracy in simulated high-pressure exercises, while rookies had 54% accuracy. When the simulated assailant pulled a cell phone instead of a gun, the experienced officers only opened fire 18% of the time, while the inexperienced but trained officers fired 62% of the time. What this says to me is that even someone who has chosen law enforcement as a profession finds their job more difficult in an active shooter situation. I understand that the proposed Marshall program includes more than 100 hours of training, but none of that will replicate the life and death situation of an active shooter on campus. Furthermore, firearm skills are perishable, and benefits of training diminish over time. If skills learned aren't practiced, you lose 20% within 7 to 10 days, and up to 80% within a few weeks. We cannot realistically expect our children's teachers, coaches, principals, and guidance counselors to outperform law enforcement officers when it comes to accuracy, judgment, and decision-making during an active shooter situation. I will not risk putting my children in a classroom where they may become part of the periphery that is killed by crossfire or ricochets thanks to a school marshal. In fact, this debate has me looking at Florida Virtual School for the first time ever. I support armed, uniformed school resource officers at every school. Let teachers teach and coaches coach. Please do not arm any school personnel.
And that concludes our public speaking. We truly wish to thank each of you for your willingness to speak to the board, share your passions, share your time, and certainly all of the things that you brought tonight. I know lots of us took lots of notes, so we do appreciate that. Does any board member need a break before we move on? No? Okay, we're at board member reports and discussion. Is there anything outside of the security plan that anybody'd like to discuss? I think the security plan is obviously something that we need to have the discussion about, obviously in public. I know we got some background information. The law just was signed this weekend. Does not go in effect until this summer, obviously, but there's some very specific things in there that I think we need to be aware of and figure out how we're going to attack them. Most of which is the mandate for school resource officers in every single school, which we all, I think, believe is a absolute must and something that we want to happen. But there doesn't seem to be as much funding to go along with it. So where we would get that money from is puts us in a position where we need to figure out how we would supplement that. There is three things that can, or two other things that can take the place, from what I understand, of a SRO, a traditional SRO, and that would be if the organization had its own police force. We don't have that, obviously, but there are universities that do, and so I think that applies to them. And then the third is the Guardian program. And so somehow we have to figure out how we're going to get armed personnel in each school, since that is the directive and that is the legislative intent and the law that I understand. I open up to my board members for discussion. If you have some salient points or things that you'd like to hear. Obviously, there's nothing that we can vote on at this point. We don't have a lot of the information still from the legislature. We have what was delivered to us. We've got, as the superintendent said, a lot of people delving into it, and we've got our legal team jumping into it, trying to figure out exactly what it is we need to comply with. And I think that, I think we heard tonight that we have a lot of school districts that have already opted out of a program that they don't even know anything about. I like to think Brevard is a little bit forward-thinking in the fact that we are objective and want to look at all the facts and all of the specifics before we opt out of something that we know nothing about. And certainly, if you look at some of the statements made by school districts, specifically, I think Pinellas is one of them, they say only trained law enforcement personnel. Well, that would be the definition of the Guardian program. And so they are definitely leaving themselves open a window there, because that is what the Guardian program is a trained law enforcement program. So I think we need to have that discussion, and I'd like to open it to my fellow board members to see what you think.
Sure, I'll
Mr. Ziegler.
start a little bit here and just want to say that obviously we all struggle with the challenges of safety. We struggle with the thought if something happened and we didn't do enough. We struggle with the thought, obviously, from what we heard tonight, that it's possible to do too much if we were to allow inadequately trained individuals. As I understand it, and unfortunately we're going to struggle in our society with some assumptions, we heard a lot tonight because there's not a lot of clarity. Some people came up and asked a lot of questions. And those are good questions because we get a lot of those same questions too. So don't think we have those answers, but we can assure you if we haven't thought of the question and you asked it, we're going to ask it. I heard from most everybody that deputy arrests are only law enforcement trained deputies. I think that's a very high bar. That's very, very important, and I think this board agrees with that level. There were some people that said no guns whatsoever in schools. I think even alluded to SROs without weapons, as Mr. Craig, as you had stated very factually. Unfortunately, now that's not a mandate. I don't think anybody really believes in that, but wholeheartedly, or the majority don't. But it's mandate. We've got to figure out how to do that. I would like to let everybody know that if all the money existed to put fully trained, experienced officers in our school, one in every school right now, that is not going to be able to be accomplished most likely by the beginning of next school year, because that amount of personnel just doesn't exist right now, and the law enforcement has to go through a process of hiring and training and et cetera, et cetera. So, but I could assure you that that is a topic of conversation, is how do we provide that protection and that safety as soon as possible. I would think at this time we need more information. We also need a proposal from our sheriff. He did a general proposal. We need to know what we're talking about. Are we talking about SROs? Solutions are important. If, unfortunately, a situation occurred, we need to know how to minimize it as quickly as possible. Is that one solution I heard was an SRO in every building? It sounds like a glorious idea. I don't know what that would cost, but it sounds like an idea that most everybody can get behind. That would probably minimize the situation right away. I've always said I don't like the idea of schools feeling like prisons with fences and barbed wire and metal detectors, yet I hear that constantly. Let's lock them down and make them safe. It's a challenge on where to go, but we know that we are responsible and should be held responsible for keeping your kids safe, and therefore closing the door on anything that we don't understand in detail, I don't think is being open-minded to coming up with a solution that we can all agree to. So I need more information. I need to know what that's going to look like. We had an opportunity to ask some questions today, but we don't know the whole dynamic of how all of this is going to work. Some great points were brought up tonight that bring some more cause for pause. So we need to decide what our next step is. And aside from what is mandated by us, including what's mandated that we can't quite afford, we got to figure that out. We'll figure that out one way or the other. We need some more details. And I guess that's going to come by the sheriff letting us know and letting the public know what those details are. Because I agree with law enforcement trained deputies as a standard.
Ms. Deskovich?
Sure, I'll chime in. I think that we have to look at every avenue. I am on board for anything that's going to add security and safety to our schools, but I also am passionate about our mental health avenue, as you all know. I think we need to come at it from both angles. I'm very curious to see a detailed proposal from Sheriff Ivey, so whatever action we need to take to, if my board agreed, I would want more detailed information from him. As most people know, we approved last year the fencing and other security measures. We also approved in December to bring in a third-party expert organization to send out to bid to come in and evaluate each of our campuses, and we're looking forward to seeing what the results of that study are to harden each of our schools. I think there's a lot on the table, and I'm open to every one of them. Thank you.
Mr. Susan?
I know one place we can go get the money is that, you know, if we decided not to go with armored cars and put a resource officer ahead of that, there's some funding source right there, because we haven't agreed to the armored car yet. So that would be a great funding source to pull some resource officers from.
Do you know how many resource officers would that be?
We had, it's about $250,000 this year that we haven't spent. It's $250,000 reoccurring. So you talk about maybe at Sheriff Ivey's proposal, it's 2 off the front, but then you can start getting more and more. I would rather have 2 resource officers in the schools than armored cars running around. It's an idea.
Ms. Belford?
Thank you, Mr. Craig. Like Ms. Duskovich, certainly I think the mental health piece is a significant one. As a drowning prevention advocate, one of the things that we talk about all the time is layers of protection. And I think, you know, the point is you have as many layers as you can get there, from restricting access to children being trained for survival, to parents being trained to respond to an emergency with CPR first aid, to, I think there are many aspects. So I think we do, and I have said from the get-go, I think we collectively have said nothing is off the table right now, because we just don't have enough information on any of it to make a decision at this point. We have to know what our requirement is for school resource officers, how many we would actually need based on statute, what that cost would be. So I think there are a lot of factors there in addition to determining, you know, the details on the other layers as well. But I do think that we have got to get specifics before we can go anywhere else with it. So I think we need the breakdown on that information from Sheriff Ivey as far as cost on SROs, number of SROs. We need that information, I think, probably from our municipalities, and we also need the details of the proposed program so that we can weigh it all going forward. I think it's easy to say I'm not going to support this or that for philosophical reasons or for political reasons or for whatever, but I think if we're not looking at all of the details and making an informed decision, then I think we are doing a disservice.
Thank you, Ms. Belford. I agree completely. So I think what I'm hearing is that obviously lots of questions. I know a lot of questions were brought up here by the public. I know we've all taken quite a few notes. I'd encourage each board member to kind of consolidate those and send them maybe over to Pam so we can maybe get some sort of idea of consistent themes in some of those questions and some of those suggestions that were brought up by the public tonight. I think from an overall picture, what I'm hearing is that we need to probably give the superintendent some direction to get some more information from the sheriff in the terms of probably a overarching security MOU that encompasses all of the things that are both things that we do now and also that are brought into law by the current or by the recent bill that was passed. Without having that big overarching picture of how those layers work and what his vision is, since we have given him the responsibility and his team the responsibility of district security, I think we need to be able to see what that looks like from a big picture point of view. I also hear that there are some concerns about SRO costs, both what we have now, what the legislature has mandated we do, and what the money source that came along with the bill that was signed is going to be able to provide. And I think there is a gap there, and we need to understand what that gap is. Very key point was brought up about it's not just the Brevard Sheriff's Office, it's our municipalities as well. We have SROs from Cocoa Beach. That's the SRO at Cocoa Beach Junior Senior High School, is the Cocoa Beach policeman. We have Rockledge policemen. We have we have a variety of different municipalities that partner with us in our security team as well. And so we need to understand how that layers in to the overall picture. But since the sheriff and his team own the district security, I think that's where we need to see what that vision looks like so that we have something tangible to look at. In that same vein, I think we also need to have an idea of what internal policies and procedures would look like here from new SROs, how they would interact in the elementary level and that type of thing, and how any other things that come from this current legislation that was signed, what we would need to adjust to make sure that we are in line with that legislation, that we are upholding it, and obviously that it falls into line with what the board's direction is as well. So I think, at least from a policy standpoint, I look towards legal. From a procedural standpoint, back over to the superintendent and his team to look at how those procedures would work, and that's really getting into the granularity of how things work inside individual schools, and who is what that team looks like inside each school. The third party for hardening was brought up, a very key point there that we had already agreed to put that out for RFP. I think that's critical. I don't think we're going to be able to get it done by the time, believe it's August 1st. We have to have a district-wide what would you call it? District-wide assessment, security assessment. And I think that is at a more big picture level, utilizing the Department of Education forms that they already have, so we can do that. But I think we still, as a district, would definitely want to continue and proceed with getting that third party to take the hard look at us from how we harden each school, and that's going to take some time, but I don't see any reason why we would change that. Mental health. Ms. Deskovich is right on point. Everyone up here, I know, spent time with students up in Tallahassee who made impassioned pleas about mental health. I can't imagine that our students did not make an impact on the legislature when they were up there, and that this portion of this bill that came out was a direct result of their incredible oratory skills and persuasion, because they really did a good job. Interestingly enough, I think it's the only piece in this entire bill that has recurring funding associated with it, and so that is something else that we need to look at, because it's great to say we're going to put an SRO in every building this year, and even if we come up with the funding through the state and culling together other sources, it's not there for the next year. And so we need to look hard as to how that's going to impact us. And I know that our legal team is already looking at some issues there and reaching out to other counties to see what their interpretation is. So I look to the superintendent. Dr. Blackburn, does that give you enough to go on as far as a looking at the overall security plan, incorporating all the things that are in the bill that was signed, making sure that it matches what we have now, and giving us or going back to the sheriff to get an MOU and to see what that would look like, and how he envisions putting that security plan into place here? And if not, please tell us differently.
I have clarity on what the MOU or what the vision would look like from the sheriff, our current strategies, and what it means for the future. I think I understand what you mean by check to see whatever internal policies or procedures would have to be executed. That would be based on my understanding of the sheriff's proposal.
Correct.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And alignment to the legislature, I'm unclear about.
I guess it's making sure that we from our understanding, at least from my personal understanding, and somebody else jump in, that we have to have that, we have to have some sort of armed personnel in, according to the bill, in each school, right? Whether that's an SRO or whether that's some other form, either the Guardian program or you decide to hire an outside security team, but I don't think that's going to happen. That's kind of where I'm looking at, is to make sure that we understand how we're going to do that.
So how we're going to fulfill the intent of the
Correct.
legislative action?
Correct.
Okay.
Which I think will be part of the sheriff's plan, I would hope, because I think he's very involved in that understanding of that plan.
I would imagine that the sheriff's plan, I don't want to speak for the sheriff, but I would imagine that the sheriff's plan would be in alignment with state legislative action.
Just making sure that we cross those Ts, you know, and that we understand that legal looks at it, make sure that we're all on the same page. That's all. Yes, Ms. Deskovich?
Yeah, I was looking over my notes here, and since we're all here, I am very interested in the idea that came up about a trained medic at each school. I don't know where to start with that, but if everyone thinks that's also a good idea, can we also give a little direction for some kind of research to be done on how we would maybe go about, where we would start? Is it possible? Who would train? That kind of, no urgency. Does everyone?
Say that again, because I think I didn't understand.
I'm interested in having a trained medic. If you all, I'm interested in
Training.
medic.
Training medic, I'm sorry.
The speaker that spoke about
Yep.
having the trained medic somewhere within the school also. So if you had, an armed personnel is one thing, but someone on staff too that could be in the situation treating before you have to wait for people to get there, the opportunity to save lives. And so, again, I don't know what that would look like. I don't know how many people you would train. I'm interested, very interested in that idea.
Can we add that to the direction that we at least explore what type of training someone would have to go through? And I'm assuming, Ms. Deskovich, you mean someone already on staff, not hiring somebody new.
Correct.
But training some volunteers if they wanted to learn, a traumatic response, triage, that type of thing.
The teacher at Palm Bay High brought it up, and I hadn't thought of it before, and I just thought it was a really good idea.
Mr. Craig?
Yep.
So
Interestingly-
explore
Oh.
what it would, I'm sorry, just clarification. You want me to, I will stop.
Go ahead, explore.
Explore current staff member getting medic training, was that what it was? Okay,
Traumatic triage, something, I think is what that gentleman was referring to.
got it.
Yes, Mr. Ziegler?
Interestingly enough, Ms. Deskovich, that stirred a thought of a challenge that we currently have before us right now, and that is nurses. And that we are going to have a conversation real soon on how we solve that problem. Maybe there's a dual role capability there if we take on the hiring of the nurses directly as opposed to outsourcing through the health department, and then have that amped up capability, medic training and whatever. I don't know what that'll look like. Again, not our expertise, but maybe there's an opportunity there to solve two problems with one solution.
Anyone else? Do you have sufficient direction? You sure? No. What aren't you sure about? Please.
I'm good. We have a lot of work ahead of us.
There's a lot of work.
There's
Absolutely.
a laundry list of uncertainties. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, when I hear the suggestion of looking into more, to be quite frank and honest, we don't have the resources on the table to accomplish what's already expected of us. So that's just a brutal fact, right? So the idea of looking at more, I just cringe when I think about the expenses that will come along with more.
Oh, I agree. But, I think it's worth at least seeing if there's if other places have done it. I don't know.
Are you talking about more with the medic?
Yes, the medic. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
I just want information at this point. It may not cost much. and who knows where the funding would come from. I mean, just information at this point. It's an idea out there that I thought we should explore. But as far as never mind, I'll leave it at that.
All right. Well, to quote one of the speakers, it definitely requires a thoughtful process. And the only way we can execute a thoughtful process is with the actual information in front of us. And I think it is critical that we explore every option and go down every path to make sure that we make the right decisions for our kids and every other kid, obviously, in this district. We are parents, first of all, and the security of our kids is just as critical as the security of every child in this district and every staff member in this district. So I think it is critical that we dive as deep as we need to ensure we get the right solutions. Is there any more business to come before the board? Yes, Ms. Belford.
I will just make a quick comment, and I'll get notes out to you all on our last legislative committee meeting. This past Friday, we delved into the budget some, and although the budget has not yet officially been signed by the governor, if he so desires, he could throw some more money in there for us before he signs. But I think one of the things that was glaringly obvious and something that we had discussed, Dr. Blackburn and I had discussed previously, and I think he had made a couple of comments that the money for school safety has to come from somewhere, right? So part of our funding, and for those of you who haven't been exposed to the way that they fund our schools and how convoluted the formulas are, part of our funding is our base student allocation. And typically the base student allocation increases each year. And that's where increases in funding come from, and that's critical because that's our most flexible funding. So it's not categorical funding, right, where they tell us what we have to do with the dollars. So one of the things that we saw this year is the base student allocation increase is like 76 cents. 47 cents? 47 cents. As opposed to previous years where it has been, I think last year it was $7 to the BSA, and prior to that, the average is like, I don't know, $50 to $100 per year. Point being, this year, because of the increase in the categorical funding, which I think was alluded to earlier, where the state is telling us you have to spend these dollars on these things, the flexible funding in our base student allocation has taken a hit. And so I think that's something that we have to, as a team, consider as we look at what our options are going forward with budget discussions, and look at where we can maximize impact from categoricals to free up some of the other items. So like I said, I'll get you the detailed notes out, but I just felt like it was worth saying, hey, something we should have our eyes on because it could be problematic going forward.
Absolutely. Dr. Blackburn, anything final?
Sure. I heard one comment referencing armored cars, and I know that is an initiative for this year. Is the board interested in staff and I looking at all of our strategic initiatives that we once planned to seek resources to reallocate towards this effort?
Board? Ms. Desko?
Well, I think the armored car was just kind of right at the top of the list since it was thrown out in conversation and it's a little bit of money, but we have to identify how much we need. Just like any other list, once we know how much we need, then we could look at those funding priorities and see if we can kind of name them back in a priority order, just like we do everything else. So that we may have to look at those, but let's figure out how short we're going to be, and also we're going to be real short, but also realize that it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to because the resources are not available overnight. So we may be able to do this over a period of time. But yeah, those may be back on the table. Absolutely, security and safety is clearly the utmost priority right now. And actually, well, I shouldn't even say right now. For this board, it always has been.
I don't know how you would undo reading coaches, social workers, SROs that we've already hired. I mean, that's all out of that category unless you, I don't understand. I think everything
For
is
the,
already.
for the upcoming year, not for this year, for the next budget cycle. Anything, because there are priorities that we've decided upon that we did implement this year that flow through to the next year. And I believe that's what Dr. Blackburn is referring to as the ones we agreed to fund for following years. Do we look at those?
That's correct. If you recall the strategic list, I mean, we have a significant financial shortfall in being able to implement these security measures. There are items, armored car was mentioned, and I get that's a very sexy item, but it's one of the lower values on that list. If the board would like me, staff and I, to take a look at those priorities to find even larger amounts of monies, dial back on our strategic initiatives, we may be able to put a significant dent into these security measures.
And I think that the argument is it's not that we would look at all fund, not just the one security initiatives from last year, but it would be where we could cut in general. And the reason that the armored car was brought up is because we haven't implemented it yet. And it's just been out there. So that's the reason. So any of those and going forward, that was it.
Right, so we haven't opened up South Lake yet either. We haven't implemented our regional busing yet either. So there are great opportunities for us to do exactly what you suggested.
So what I'm hearing is I have to say that I think the superintendent's made a good point. I mean, if we're going to pick and, you can't pick and choose things. So if we're going to look backwards at things that we've already approved, then we have to look at them all. And I think that's what you're talking about. Is that correct? I mean, that is true. You can't cherry pick individual items. And I understand what your point was, but there's a lot of other things that are still out on the table. And so what's the board's temperature on that? Do we want to go back and look at all the items that we've looked at? Or do we go forward?
I think we should find out how much we need to do and then have this conversation after that. I really do. That's what I believe.
Okay.
But
Anybody else? I think that's what Mr. Ziegler was saying. We need to understand what the differentials are in shortfalls might be, looking at the big picture, including all the, not only the sheriff, but the municipalities and all the different schools that have partial SROs or whatever, right?
Correct.
I was just going to echo that. I think details are important for us to be able to look at how we go forward. But going back to our layers of protection, many of those things, as Ms. Deskovich indicated, are things that are one of those layers of protection when it comes to social emotional supports and those types of things. So SROs that we already added, with some of those, we grant funded those non-recurring dollars. So I just want to make sure that our public doesn't think that we're sitting on millions and millions of dollars that could potentially be used. I think we need to clarify, not opposed to the conversation, but A, let's get the details of what the requirements are that we have to meet and what that cost is. And then B, let's look at the details of those things that we're discussing. Because, for example, the 5 additional SROs, 7 additional SROs, those were grant funded with non-recurring dollars. And so that's a gap that's going to be there, you know. Yeah, so I think we just need not be knee-jerk, and we need to make thoughtful decisions.
Agreed. Anybody else?
No.
Any more business? And the meeting is adjourned.